Chapter 384. The conversation in front of her made Nongju slightly sigh in her heart. Just now, the three of them were using both carrot and stick to force her. But when they met Bai Changchun, even if Bai Changchun was aggressive, the three of them had to suppress their anger. This was the prestige of the world's #1 master. The three were experts at the late spirit severing stage, rare top cultivators in the world. They had never been bullied like this before. If it was in the past, they wouldn't have to be so humble. But since the battle in the East Sea, where 16 unconvinced spirit-severing experts were killed by Bai Changchun, no one in the world dared to go against Bai Changchun's edge. They were in a stalemate. Nongju said to Bai Changchun, "Yu Qianqiu killed Bing Qingzi's disciple. This old guy is famous for protecting his disciples. Should we tell them that Yu Qianqiu is your disciple?" "There's no need. Let this junior solve his own problems with his own ability. I can't help him for a lifetime. However, if someone who shouldn't have interfered, I won't let a single one of them get away." Bai Changchun expressed his stance through voice transmission. Nongju stared at Bai Changchun for a while. Her eyes flickered. No one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, he broke the stalemate and said, "Bing Qingzi, my disciple Zi is going to the cultivation world of Wuxia to gain experience. She has no right to interfere in your affairs. If she is really involved in your affairs coincidentally, then let me do it with my own ability. As long as you old guys don't interfere, I will also make my stance clear. I, Nongju, will not interfere with the junior's business." Bing Qingzi and the other two were startled. They didn't expect Nongju to say such words even with Bai Changchun's support. Wasn't this what they wanted to achieve? Baikong immediately nodded and said, "Brother Nongju is right. This is the junior's business. Us old guys can't interfere. Let the juniors fight with their own abilities." He looked at the other two and said, "I Baikong have the same stance as Brother Nongju. What do you two think?" Bing Qingzi and Hu Changshuo's eyes flashed with joy. They had already sworn an oath. Now that Nongju had expressed her stance, they had nothing to worry about, and could let their disciples do whatever they wanted. The two of them exchanged glances and nodded in unison. It's settled then. Looking at Nongju, Bai Changchun was also a little surprised. He didn't expect that Nongju was really willing to let his daughter suffer. It seemed that Bai Changchun's previous persuasion had stimulated Nongju and ruined his previous plan. Now it was really up to Yu Qianqiu and the others. "Since everything has been made clear, we shall not disturb you any further." Baikong cupped his fists towards Bai Changchun and Nongju. The three of them did not want to stay any longer and shot into the sky. After watching them disappear, Nongju shook her head and said with a bitter smile, "I've given my daughter to your disciple. I hope he won't let me down." Bai Changchun was speechless. "If I knew you would agree, I wouldn't have come out." What an unnecessary move. It was not convenient for him to say this. If he did, he would be suspected of plotting against Nongju. Bai Changchun snorted coldly and disappeared with a swing of his sleeve. He returned to the Langxian courtyard in the blessed land of bamboo and continued drinking tea. 2 days later, Yu Qianqiu and Zi arrived at a stretch of deep mountains. On the main mountain range between the mountains, there were magnificent buildings that were connected layer by layer. This was the 10,000 demons, the #1 demonic sect. Before the two of them got close, they heard Qiu Wuyuan's laughter coming from afar. "Brother Yu, you're finally here." Obviously, they were discovered by the people of the 10,000 demons as soon as they arrived at this area. 5 gray figures came together and stopped in front of the two of them. The one leading them was Qiu Wuyuan. The two of them also stopped flying. Yu Qianqiu bowed and said, "Greetings, senior." The other 4 had cold expressions. Yu Qianqiu had seen them before. They were the 4 generals of the demon clan who had been following Qiu Wuyuan for a long time. The 4 of them used to be the 4 servants of the previous sect leader. Not only were they high in cultivation, but they were also infamous. Because Qiu Wuyuan had been working outside for a long time, the previous sect leader sent the 4 of them to Qiu Wuyuan. It was probably more to protect his own disciple. "I just received news from the Cultivation Alliance. They said that Qianghua Fairy of the Moon Clan has already vouched for the 2 of you. Now you are also members of the Cultivation Alliance." Qiu Wuyuan laughed. Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi looked at each other. They didn't expect Qianghua Fairy to be so efficient. Qiu Wuyuan raised his hand and said, "Please." The few of them flew directly to the Grand Palace at the top of the mountain range. The entire palace had the aura of sky-bearing, and was indeed magnificent. As soon as they landed in front of the palace, a group of people walked out of the palace. All of them looked serious and flew away, leaving only 3 old men standing in front of the palace. Qiu Wuyuan, who was originally happy, was slightly stunned. He quickly walked to a gloomy old man with white hair tied up by a black crown in the middle and asked, "Palace Master, did something happen?" So this was the famous Palace Master of the 10,000 demons, Bu Yunxiao. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he sized him up carefully. Bu Yunxiao nodded with a serious expression and said, "Wuyuan, I just received news that eldest brother Yan Bugui brought a group of people to the 100 Flowers Valley. They are now in a confrontation with the Cultivation Alliance. Something might happen at any time. Go with the 4 generals of the demon clan. It's best if you can persuade eldest brother not to do anything for Master's sake. I'll go see Master now." "Ah, eldest brother?" Sigh. Qiu Wuyuan stomped his feet and sighed. When he turned around and saw Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi, he realized that he almost forgot about them. He immediately turned around and said, "Palace Master, these 2 are Yu Qianqiu and Miss Ziyi. You see." Bu Yunxiao glanced at the 2 and his gloomy face immediately changed into a smile. He cupped his hands and said, "I happen to have something to do. Sorry for the delay." Then he turned around and said to the old man next to him, "Fifth junior brother, take the 2 guests to rest. Don't neglect them. I'll go see Master and come back soon." The 5th junior brother nodded and raised his hand to Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi. He said with a smile, "Please follow me. There's no need to trouble yourself." Yu Qianqiu bowed to Bu Yunxiao and said, "Palace Master Bu, Ziyi and I have just joined the Cultivation Alliance. Since the Cultivation Alliance is in trouble, we should do our best to help. Since Senior Qiu is going to the 100 Flowers Valley, we decided to go with Senior Qiu. He didn't want to come to the 10,000 demons in the first place. Not only did he not get any benefits, he might even be schemed against by others. If it wasn't for Qiu Wuyuan, he wouldn't have come. Now he found an excuse to leave." Bu Yunxiao pondered for a moment before he nodded and said, "If that's the case, I won't force you. After this is over, I hope the 2 of you can give me face and come to my myriad demons palace again. I want to apologize for my poor hospitality this time." "Palace Master, you're too kind." Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and said. At the side, Qiu Wuyuan seemed to be getting impatient. He waved his hand and yelled, "Let's go." He and the 4 generals of the Mo family shot into the sky first. Yu Qianqiu also jumped onto his flying sword and chased after them with Ziyi. "Yu Qianqiu." Bu Yunxiao stared at the figures flying away and mumbled a few words. Then he shot into the deep mountains. A few figures flew across the sky. Qiu Wuyuan and the other 4 gradually pulled away from Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi. From this, one could see the difference in cultivation between Yu Qianqiu and them. Of course, it wasn't that Ziyi couldn't fly faster. It was because she had been accompanying Yu Qianqiu the whole time. "Brother Yu, it's an emergency. I'll be going first." Qiu Wuyuan's voice came from the sky. Then the 5 in front sped up again. They immediately left the 2 behind further and further behind. "Damn it. If you want to leave, then leave. Why are you shouting so loudly? Are you trying to bully me because I can't fly fast?" Yu Qianqiu turned his head and looked at Ziyi. Luckily, Ziyi didn't care whether she was fast or slow. He slightly regretted that he didn't bring the whole flying instrument. Although it couldn't catch up to the speed of a tribulation-passing cultivator, it was at least faster than him. Moreover, with Ziyi controlling it, he could rest in peace. He had been flying around in the sky for the past few days and didn't really land. However, he immediately dismissed the idea. It seemed that Ziyi didn't know the way. It would be troublesome if she flew further and further away. Ever since Ziyi followed him, she would ask questions at the beginning. Now, no matter where they went, she would look around with her eyes wide open. It was as if she wanted to memorize the terrain of every place she passed. What a stupid idea. Yu Qianqiu found it funny and didn't say anything. The two of them flew at a moderate speed. Finally, they arrived at the Hundred Flowers Valley before sunset. Yu Qianqiu took out the Hundred Flowers Valley Entry Jade Archive and brought Ziyi in. Then he made an Entry Jade Archive for Ziyi at the city gate. Ziyi held it in her hand like it was a treasure and looked at it. Then she said to Yu Qianqiu, "Thank you." Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. Then he remembered that ever since he brought her out of the purple bamboo forest in the southern sea, this was the first time she had received something that belonged to her. Thinking about how this girl had helped him earn 50 million, Yu Qianqiu felt a little guilty. He decided that tonight he wouldn't care about anything else. He would be extravagant just for this girl. He couldn't let the horse run away without feeding it grass, could he? As soon as they arrived at the Hundred Flowers Valley, many people immediately recognized Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu didn't care. He brought Ziyi straight to the best restaurant in the area, the Hundred Flowers House. After entering, he knocked on the counter and said, "Give me the best private room with a view to the night view of the Hundred Flowers Valley. Give me the best dishes and wine." The innkeeper was obviously a newcomer. He didn't know who Yu Qianqiu was. After looking at the ordinary clothes Yu Qianqiu was wearing, he smiled and said, "The best private room we have here, plus the best dishes and wine, will cost at least 1,000 high-grade spirit stones. Are you sure you want it?" 1,000 high-grade spirit stones? Ziyi's eyes widened. She quickly tugged at Yu Qianqiu and said, "That much? Let's find a cheaper room." Yu Qianqiu wasn't afraid of people being mean to him. He could be even meaner than them. However, he couldn't stand people being nice to him. After hearing Ziyi's words, Yu Qianqiu immediately turned around and slammed his palm on the counter. With a bang sound, he directly collapsed the counter. He shouted in a deep voice, "Are you afraid that I can't afford it?" Ziyi was stunned. She didn't know why he was so angry. The innkeeper saw that the counter had been destroyed. Wasn't this causing trouble? His face immediately darkened. He said sternly, "What are you trying to do?" Someone actually dared to cause trouble at the Hundred Flowers house in the Hundred Flowers Valley. There were many people inside and outside the store who came to watch the show. Chapter 385. Isn't that Yu Qianqiu? So it's that madman. No wonder. Hearing that, Yu Qianqiu, who was already in a bad mood, immediately took out a big black machete from his storage bag. Wherever the blade pointed, everyone retreated. "Who's tired of living? Why don't you say a few words for me? I'll make sure you're satisfied." Yu Qianqiu said expressionlessly with the machete in hand. No one said anything. Sure enough, the bigger the machete, the more intimidating it was. There was an old man in the store who recognized Yu Qianqiu. He quickly whispered a few words into the manager's ear. However, it seemed like the manager had already heard everyone's words, especially that rather unique machete, which was unique in the cultivation world. It was hard not to know who the person in front of him was. Yu Qianqiu turned the machete around and pointed it at the manager. The manager's expression changed. He immediately smiled and said, "So it's Mr. Yu. It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. If you have any orders, just tell me. As long as I can do it, I'll do my best." The manager had no choice but to admit defeat. This guy was famous for being a madman in the cultivation world. Was there anyone he didn't dare to hit? No. Was there anyone he didn't dare to kill? No. Even the dignified sect master Ong Kwangsung was killed by him, but he was still alive and kicking here. So what if he broke a counter? What was the point of a small manager's face? The blade of that big black machete was just a little bit away from pointing at the manager's head. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and said, "You're a snob. If you don't want me to tear down the Hundred Flowers residence, hurry up and prepare a private room." Yu Qianqiu knew how to play this game. Some people weren't afraid of good people, but they were afraid of hooligans. Since his reputation wasn't good, he might as well be unreasonable. The onlookers at the side were convinced. This guy was an out-and-out madman. He came all the way to the Hundred Flowers Valley to tear down the Hundred Flowers Palace. There would probably be a good show to watch. It was Ziyi's first time seeing such a bandit side of Yu Qianqiu. She was really a little surprised. No need to prepare, no need to prepare. There's an empty private room upstairs. Follow me. The manager carefully moved away from the machete and led the way upstairs. Before Yu Qianqiu went up the stairs, he coldly swept his eyes over the crowd. They all acted as if they didn't care about him and dispersed. But after they left, they gathered at a place not far from the 100 Flowers house and waited, ready to watch the show. Sure enough, as soon as Yu Qianqiu went upstairs, an attendant immediately ran out of the store and flew towards the Flower Palace. Everyone's eyes lit up, and they continued to wait. Zhang Gui led the two of them to the private room on the top floor and asked them to wait for a moment before he turned and ran down the stairs. The manager here elegant and elegance 8AA there's AAA there. TAAA restaurant. AAAU. ZE asked curiously, is this really a restaurant? What an idiotic question. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. He walked to the window and pushed it open. A cool breeze blew in. It was mixed with the fragrance of the 100 Flowers Valley's flowers. ZE also came after smelling the fragrance. The two of them stood at the window. The sun had just set. A patch of burning clouds dyed the sky red. The mountains were hazy under the twilight. Tired birds flew across the sky and returned to the forest. Downstairs was the market of the 100 Flowers Valley. Although it was already night, it was still bustling with activity. The commoners in the cultivation world lit up their fluorescent stones. They didn't want to give up the chance to earn spirit stones at night. All of this was new to ZE, who stayed in the South Sea purple bamboo forest for a long time. She couldn't get enough of it. She pointed at those people and asked, "What are they doing?" "They're making money like us, of course," Yu Qianqiu replied. "Can we make money like that?" ZE asked doubtfully. Then she nodded and said, "Then let's not leave here. We'll make money here first. It's a waste of time to run around all day. We don't know when we'll be able to complete Senior Bai's trust." Yu Qianqiu turned to look at her. It was the first time he found this one-track-minded girl so cute. He smiled and said, "They want to live a peaceful life. So they're making a small amount of money. But we're making a lot of money. If you follow me, you won't have to make these small amounts of money." Baihua Fairy and her daughter Yan Zixia of Baihua Palace were worried about Yan Bugui and his men. Although they were stopped by the people from the Cultivation Alliance, and Qiu Wuyuan, and the others who came in time to persuade them to leave, Yan Bugui kept saying that he would come every day until the mother and daughter agreed to meet him. The mother and daughter were really tired. But before the first wave subsided, another wave arose. A disciple of Baihua Palace quickly came and reported, "Palace Master, someone from Baihua Palace reported that Yu Qianqiu just caused trouble at Baihua Palace. He even broke the counter. How should we deal with him?" "Yu Qianqiu?" Baihua Fairy was a little surprised and asked, "The one who held the blade drawing ceremony, Yu Qianqiu?" The disciple bowed and said, "It should be him. Someone reported that he even took out that blade to scare everyone. He's very shameless, so it can't be anyone else but him." The mother and daughter exchanged glances. Just a few days ago, they received a message from Ma Jugu, saying that if they ever run into any trouble in the future, they can look for Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu wouldn't shirk their responsibility, and would have a way to solve it for them. The mother and daughter were still confused by this. Although Yu Qianqiu was quite famous in the cultivation world, what problem could he possibly help them solve? But Ma Jugu wasn't one to speak carelessly. Now, before they even looked for him to solve their problem, he's already causing trouble. "I'll go take a look," Yan Zixia said. As she was about to leave, her mother called out, "Zixia, it's best if you don't go out. If you run into your father, you'll be in trouble again." Baihua Fairy waved her hand at the disciple and said, "Leave. Don't look into Yu Qianqiu's matter. All of his expenses at Baihua Palace will be free." The disciple was a bit surprised, but still followed her words and left. Yan Zixia's eyes flickered as she looked outside the palace, not knowing what she was thinking. After enjoying the scenery for a while, Yu Qianqiu still didn't see any food being served. Just as he was feeling strange, he suddenly noticed that many people downstairs were looking at them as if they were watching a show. Yu Qianqiu's expression suddenly changed. This shopkeeper was clearly stalling for time. He might have gone to Baihua Palace to look for reinforcements. He slammed his palm on the windowsill and said in a low voice, "Do you really think I don't dare to burn down Baihua Palace?" Ze, who was admiring the scenery outside, was surprised, not knowing why he suddenly got angry. At this time, the shopkeeper's voice came from outside. "Mister, don't worry, the food is here." As soon as the shopkeeper came in, a few waiters came in with trays of food and wine, quickly arranging them on the table. Yu Qianqiu stared at him and asked, "Why are you so late? Do you want to do something?" "Mister, you misunderstand." The shopkeeper bowed with a smile. "We just received an order from the palace lord. The palace lord said to treat you well, and all the expenses of Baihua Palace will be waived. You see, since the palace lord has already given the order, we naturally don't dare to delay, so the preparation time is a bit long." For this shopkeeper to be sent to be the shopkeeper of Baihua Palace, he wasn't completely useless, he was quite good with words. When Yu Qianqiu heard about the palace lord of Baihua Palace, he immediately remembered Ma Jiugu's request. It would be a bit too much if he continued to make trouble. Seeing that the food and wine were already served, he waved his hand. "All of you can leave. Thank the palace lord for her kindness. I will thank her in person if there's a chance." "Okay, enjoy." The shopkeeper nodded and bowed, then led the waiters away. Yu Qianqiu walked around the table full of food and wine, and found that the dishes were exquisite. As expected, he waved his hand at Ze, who was looking at him. "Eat." He took the lead to sit down, and opened his mouth to eat. It would be a waste not to eat something that didn't cost money. Shopkeeper just said that it's free. Does it cost money? Ze sat down and asked. With food in his mouth, Yu Qianqiu nodded repeatedly. "It's free, eat as much as you want, otherwise it will be a waste." Hearing that it really didn't cost money, Ziyi's eyes lit up, and she immediately didn't stand on ceremony. This was what she learned from Yu Qianqiu. Don't be polite when you shouldn't be, otherwise, you would be letting yourself down. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Yu Qianqiu burped, and when he saw Ziyi stop, he was stunned. Only now did he remember something. It seemed that every time he ate, as long as he was still eating, this girl would also not stop, but as soon as he stopped, she would immediately stop eating. It seemed like this girl's appetite wasn't small. She could even keep up with his trip. Yu Qianqiu was happy. He originally wanted to be extravagant for this girl, but he didn't expect that the food and wine would be free, then he would make up for it in other ways. He stood up and smiled. "Let's go, I'll bring you out for a walk." Ziyi nodded repeatedly, and stood up as well. She loved to walk around, but it was a pity that during this period of time, she had been flying nonstop in the sky. When the two of them went downstairs, they realized that the broken counter had been replaced with a new one. It was indeed fast. Yu Qianqiu walked over and knocked on the counter, and said, "Shopkeeper, reserve 2 good rooms for me. I might have to stay here for a period of time." All right. The shopkeeper hurriedly agreed. This guy couldn't be provoked. Even the higher-ups didn't pursue the matter. What else could he say? After the two of them walked out of the 100-flower pavilion, the shopkeepers of the 4 noble clans, who had been waiting outside for a long time, immediately came over to greet them. Yu Qianqiu had a pleasant expression as he politely persuaded the 4 of them to return, and continued strolling around with Ziyi. The people who were originally prepared to watch the show immediately dispersed in disappointment. They didn't expect that the 100 Flowers Palace actually didn't cause trouble for Yu Qianqiu. And looking at how the shopkeepers of the 4 major families treated Yu Qianqiu, it seemed like the rumor that the 4 major families and Yu Qianqiu were on the same side was indeed true. The prosperity of the shop market was quite tempting to Ziyi. Seeing every novel thing, she couldn't help but stop to take a look and touch it. She was a little reluctant to let go. Yu Qianqiu was prepared to spend money tonight, so he directly said to the shopkeeper, "I'll buy it, how much?" 10 mid-grade spirit stones. The shopkeeper replied. "Isn't the price a little high?" Yu Qianqiu frowned. "Mr. Yu, look at what you're saying. I'd fool anyone but you." The shopkeeper thought to himself, "You even dared to smash the 100 Flowers house. How would my small stall dare to provoke you?" There was no more nonsense. Yu Qianqiu also wouldn't bother with these small shop owners. He directly paid and took the things. So on and so forth. Almost every stall had similar conversations. Ziyi stopped halfway and asked suspiciously, "Why does everyone here seem to know you?" Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. He refused to answer this question. He directed Ziyi's thoughts back to shopping. He followed behind her, holding a storage bag in his hand. As long as Ziyi stopped to look at or touch something, he could only do 3 things: ask for the price, pay, and pack the things. It seemed like women were born to be shopaholics, especially when there was a man who was willing to pay with money following them. After shopping at the stalls, the spirit stones were spent like flowing water. The things in the shops were much more expensive than the things in the stalls. Some of them easily cost hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of high-grade spirit stones. Ziyi didn't care whether she could use it or not. As long as she liked it, she would subconsciously nod at Yu Qianqiu. She didn't think about how much it cost. Anyway, someone was paying. Yu Qianqiu himself also couldn't remember how many types of things he sold, regardless of the size of the items. In any case, he bought almost everything in the stalls and shops. He even filled up 2 storage bags. It was already late at night. There was no more shopping. Ziyi just remembered that she seemed to have bought a lot of things. She looked at Yu Qianqiu embarrassedly and asked weakly, "It seems like you spent a lot of money." Zai, isn't it a little too late to ask this now? Yu Qianqiu's gaze had already answered her question. Ziyi became even more embarrassed. She said embarrassedly, "I really didn't mean it." "And I know you didn't mean it." Yu Qianqiu handed over the 3 storage bags and smiled. "Actually, I didn't buy much. I just filled up these 3 storage bags." Ziyi received the 3 storage bags and used her divine sense to look at them. She was shocked. She didn't expect to buy so many things just by casually strolling around. Carrying the 3 storage bags, she didn't know what to do. She once again weakly asked, "How much did you spend in total?" "It's okay. Consider these things as a gift from me. You can earn more money after you spend it, as long as you are happy." Yu Qianqiu smiled. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu didn't have any intention of blaming her, Ziyi hugged the storage bags and nodded vigorously. "And I will definitely help you earn money." She happily put away the 3 storage bags. Today could be said to be a happy day. These words made Yu Qianqiu happy. He liked to hear this the most. He felt that the money spent today was worth it. Just as he was about to bring Ziyi back to 100 Flowers House to rest, he suddenly saw an old acquaintance from supporting Immortal Island, Xiong Hui, walking towards him. This fellow used to eat and drink with him in the past, so Xiong Hui couldn't help but nod and smile. "Long time no see, how have you been?" Ziyi looked at him curiously. He really had a lot of acquaintances. Xiong Hui had hung out with him for a few days. They could be considered old friends. He wasn't like the others. He cupped his fists and said happily, "No matter how good I am, I can't compare to you. I heard that you came to 100 Flowers House and caused a ruckus the moment you arrived? You didn't come here just to ask about this, did you?" Yu Qianqiu asked. Xiong Hui shook his head and said with a serious expression, "Just now, the Cultivation Alliance received a challenge jade archive sent by Yan Bugui. All the sects in the Cultivation Alliance have received the notice. Elder Quan asked us to inform the other individual cultivators who have already joined the Cultivation Alliance and are in the 100 Flowers Valley to meet at the Cultivation Alliance tomorrow to discuss this matter. I just heard that you are here. The leader of the Moon Clan has already vouched for you. You are now also a member of the Cultivation Alliance. Because we are familiar with each other, I specially came to find you to inform you of this matter." Yan Bugui is challenging the Cultivation Alliance? Yu Qianqiu frowned and asked again to confirm. "Are you going to meet at the Cultivation Alliance tomorrow?" "Yes. You. Brother Yu, I won't say any more. I still have to inform the others. We can talk about this later." Xiong Hui cupped his fists and left. "What does challenging the Cultivation Alliance have to do with me?" Yu Qianqiu muttered softly, turned his head and said to Ziyi, "Go back and rest." After that he led Ziyi, who was like an obedient child, back to 100 Flowers House. Chapter 386. The next day, the sun had already risen high in the sky, but Yu Qianqiu was still sleeping soundly on the bed. He had been flying nonstop for the past few days, and he was indeed a little tired. Normal cultivators would probably meditate to recover, but he preferred the most primitive way of resting, sleeping. Lying on the bed with his legs spread out was also a kind of happiness. Asterisk dong dong dong. Asterisk in his dream, He was still in his previous life, and he was discussing physiological problems with a few blonde and blue-eyed ladies. Unfortunately, he was awakened by a series of knocks on the door. He got up and looked around, and he couldn't help but sigh slightly. As expected, he was dreaming. The era of four wheels was gone forever. Asterisk dong dong dong. Asterisk the knocks on the door continued, and Yu Qianqiu immediately shouted, "Who is it? Who is it? Why are you knocking on the door so early in the morning? Don't you know that you're sleeping?" He got off the bed unhappily and got up to retract all the black fiend traps that he had set up around him into his body. He had no choice but to do this. Often, people who schemed against others were also afraid of being schemed against by others. Back then, he had schemed against Lu Zhengguang here. Now that he was living here, he was also worried that he would be schemed against by others. After all, he had offended too many people. He had originally wanted to retreat to Utopia to rest, but he was a little worried about leaving Ziyi, who was as innocent as a piece of white paper here. Although Ziyi's cultivation was much higher than his, he was still a little worried. Speaking of which, he didn't know who was protecting who. He walked to the door and pulled it open. Just as he was about to curse, he saw Ziyi standing outside the door with her hands behind her back. She had an obedient expression, and there was a hint of a fawning expression on her face. This was unprecedented. Needless to say, she was the one who knocked on the door. Yu Qianqiu swallowed back his curses and asked suspiciously, "Why are you knocking on my door so early in the morning?" "It's not early. It's already noon. Didn't someone ask you to go to the Cultivation Alliance last night?" Ziyi asked. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes, turned around, and went back to his room. As he walked, he said, "In their eyes, we're just two lousy loose cultivators. Why are we involved in that? They have their meeting, and we just have to take care of ourselves." He walked to the side of the bed, tilted his body, and fell back down. In fact, he really wanted to get involved. In his words, the more people there were, the more opportunities there were to get rich. But when he thought that Yan Bugui had brought a group of people and had a grudge against him, he decided that it was better to avoid the brunt of the conflict. He did not want to be the one who challenged the Cultivation Alliance. That would not be pleasant. Ziyi entered the room and said, "But there are people from the four great clans waiting for you downstairs. They say they want to wait for you to go with them." "The four great families? Huh?" Yu Qianqiu crawled up and asked, "How did you know? You went down alone?" Ziyi stuttered and said, "Didn't you say it's a waste not to eat something that doesn't cost money? I think the food in this restaurant is quite delicious, so I went down to order some food by myself. It just so happens that the people from the four major families are waiting for you downstairs. I'll help them ask you after I finish eating." "Wouldn't it be a waste not to eat it?" Yu Qianqiu was startled. It seemed that he really did say that to her. She had a strong learning ability. He couldn't sleep anymore. He used the water spell, and a stream of clear water came out of Yu Qianqiu's palm. One stream went into his mouth to clean, and the rest was used to wash his face. After washing, the turbid water gathered into a ball. Yu Qianqiu opened the window, waved his hand, and the water turned into an arrow and shot out. As for where it would land, he was too lazy to think about it. In the end, Ziyi was completely dumbfounded. There was no one downstairs. They were probably all at the Cultivation Alliance. The four great clans sent 8 people. The 4 elders were Baishan, Tanhuazong, Jing Xingping, and Wu Anfeng. The 4 of them were at the middle stage of tribulation passing. Except for the elder from the Wu clan who looked familiar, Yu Qianqiu did not know any of them. The remaining 4 people were old acquaintances. They were the first successors of the 4 great clans, Bai Zizong and the other 3. When the 8 of them saw Yu Qianqiu, they all bowed and said, "Mr. Yu. No need to be so polite, no need to be so polite." Yu Qianqiu smiled and waved his hand. He turned around and said to Ziyi, "Go, get me the food you had this morning." Ziyi didn't say anything and went straight to the counter to order. The shopkeeper smiled and nodded, but his smile seemed a little unnatural. "Brother Bai, you guys are here too?" As soon as Yu Qianqiu said this, Bai Zizong and the other 3 quickly said, "We don't dare." Now that the seniority between them was different from before, the 4 of them didn't dare to call him brother anymore. Moreover, There were 4 elders beside him. It wasn't the right time to talk about this in front of everyone. Yu Qianqiu looked at the 4 of them and asked, "What do you want from me?" The 4 elders looked at each other and nodded. Bai Shan, the elder of the Bai clan, stood up and replied. After the 4 great clans received the Cultivation Alliance's notice, they sent us here overnight. We learned that Sir is in the 100 Flowers Valley and has joined the Cultivation Alliance. Before we left, the elders of the 4 great clans told us that if Sir needs any help, we should do our best to cooperate. Yu Qianqiu smiled noncommittally. The waiter of the 100 Flowers house had already served the food. He asked casually, "Do you want to eat together?" Seeing that they shook their heads, he didn't hold back and buried his head in the food. He didn't say anything, and no one knew what he was thinking. The 8 of them were a little speechless. They heard about him smashing the 100 Flowers house as soon as they arrived, and they still ate and lived here. They didn't hear about the people of the 100 Flowers palace doing anything to him. After eating, Yu Qianqiu patted his stomach, looking very comfortable. Bai Zizong had stayed with him before and knew that he liked to take advantage of others. He immediately went to pay for him, but the shopkeeper didn't accept it. He said that Yu Qianqiu's expenses in the 100 Flowers house were all free, which surprised the 8 of them. Smashing the place and living for free? Was there such a good thing in the world? I heard that the Cultivation Alliance is discussing something. Aren't you 4 great clans going? Yu Qianqiu asked leisurely. Sir, didn't you join the Cultivation Alliance? Didn't you receive the notice? Bai Shan asked curiously. It wasn't hard to guess what he meant. We came here to make our stand and wait for you to go together. Of course, Yu Qianqiu also heard it. He paused and said, "Someone did inform me, but I was busy with something important just now, so I was delayed." Then, sir, are you done with what you have on hand? If you're free, let's go together, Bai Shan said politely. Yu Qianqiu wanted to say that he wasn't done, but he happened to meet Ziyi's strange gaze. He couldn't help but feel guilty. Thinking about it, he felt that it wasn't good. If he kept hiding here, he had to go out and get some information. How could he get rich hiding in his room? Moreover, a whole morning had passed. The Cultivation Alliance's discussion was probably almost done. It was the right time to show his face and ask for information. All right, then let's go together. Yu Qianqiu laughed. There were exactly 10 people in the group. As soon as they left the 100 Flowers house, they started pushing each other. The 4 great clans insisted that Yu Qianqiu and Ziyi walk in front. However, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to show off at this time, so he insisted on hiding at the back. In the end, the 4 great clans couldn't persuade him, so they let him and Ziyi follow behind. It didn't take long for the group to reach the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. At this time, there were already a lot of people around. They were all people who didn't have the right to enter. Seeing that the 4 great clans had arrived, someone immediately jeered. The 4 great clans are so arrogant. Coming at this time, they really don't care about the sex. With one person taking the lead, there were others who had nothing to do and followed suit. The 4 great clans suddenly became the center of attention. Although the 4 great clans weren't happy, they wouldn't argue with these people in public. Moreover, they really came too late, so they could only look at them coldly. The jeering people took advantage of the number of people, and saw that the 4 great clans didn't react, so they were very cocky. Damn it. A bunch of hooligans, purposely making me show off. Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched. The 4 great clans became the center of attention. He couldn't keep a low profile even if he wanted to hide at the back. Many people realized that the person behind the 4 great clans was Yu Qianqiu, so they all remained silent. However, there were those who were dumb, stupid, and loud. When Yu Qianqiu showed himself, there was a person next to him who was grinning and almost spitting on Yu Qianqiu's face. Bang! A fist smashed heavily on that person's face, and blood and broken teeth flew out. Crack! A foot kicked from the side of that person's calf. The sound of the leg bone breaking was so crisp, and the whole leg was directly broken. Ah! That person fell to the ground and let out a scream. B*TC. Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't help but make a move and scolded. After some people next to that person saw who it was, they all subconsciously took a step back, Just enough time for that person to hug his leg and lie on the ground, howling and rolling. At this time, the surrounding people realized that the person who had just punched and kicked was Yu Qianqiu, and suddenly quieted down. The people from the 4 great clans looked back and were shocked. They didn't expect that Yu Qianqiu would actually make a move at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. However, the effect of this punch and kick was quite good, and the annoying noise was finally gone. The crowd in front immediately made way for them. Yu Qianqiu acted like nothing had happened, and followed behind the 4 great clans. After proving his identity at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance, they walked in together. On the flat ground of the Cultivation Alliance, hundreds of people sat cross-legged in a few circles. In the middle were the representatives of the top 10 sects of the righteous and demonic sections. At this time, they were all looking outside. Everyone first heard many people talking about the 4 great clans, and then heard the screams outside. They didn't know what was going on. All the sects were suspicious. Could it be that the people from the 4 great clans made a move at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance? At this time, the people from the 4 great clans walked in, and all the sects became more and more suspicious. What the hell are you screaming for? 2 of you go and see what exactly is going on. Qiu Wuyuan didn't know what was going on, and he shouted with a bad expression. 2 of the 10,000 demons immediately dashed out. There were many praying mats outside the venue, and the 10 of them each took one and sat at the outermost area. Although Yu Qianqiu wanted to be as low-key as possible, Ziyi's purple clothes were too eye-catching. Once everyone saw Ziyi, their eyes immediately searched for him. Qiu Wuyuan looked outside, and then looked at Yu Qianqiu with a face full of suspicion. At this time, 2 disciples of the 10,000 demons came back and reported to him. Elder Qiu, a disciple of the 6-path demon sect, was beaten outside, but no one saw clearly who did it. The person who was beaten didn't see clearly either. The 2 of them were very depressed. The person who was beaten said that he was ambushed, and he didn't see clearly, but the others all stuttered and said that they didn't see clearly. Yu Qianqiu was even more stunned. There was such a good thing? A figure in the crowd jumped into the air and flipped out of the courtyard. After a while, that person came back in a flash and stood at the periphery, staring angrily at the people from the 4 great clans. He shouted, "Who dares to hurt my disciple? Quickly come out and admit your guilt." Chapter 387. The Hexapath Devil sect was ranked 4th in the demonic Tao, just below the Corpse sect. The one who roared at the 4 major families was the chief representative of the Hexapath Devil sect, Yuan Jiukui. He was an outstanding figure in the demonic Tao, famous for his violent temper and battle prowess. Although the overall strength of the Hexapath Devil sect wasn't as strong as the other top-ranked sects, Yuan Jiukui's personal strength wasn't any weaker than the other sections. "Who injured my disciple? Come out and accept your punishment." Yuan Jiukui roared once more. When he heard that his disciple was beaten up, he immediately ran out to investigate. Although the disciple didn't see who did it, he said that it was someone from the 4 major families, so he was sure that it was someone from the 4 major families who did it. How could they accept that their disciple was beaten up when all the sects were gathered here? Furthermore, the Hexapath Devil sect had no reason to be afraid of the 4 major families, so they naturally had to get back their face. The expressions of the people from the 4 great clans changed. This was clearly against the 4 great clans. As a direct descendant of Bai Changchun, Bai Shan naturally could not let Yu Qianqiu come out to accept his punishment. Just as he was about to stand up and fight back, he was stopped by Yu Qianqiu, who was behind him. Yu Qianqiu slowly stood up. He was still happy when he heard that no one saw who did it, so he wanted to maintain his silence. However, the other party had already pointed at the noses of the 4 major families. If it was any other sect, he would definitely continue to pretend that he didn't know anything. However, the 4 major families were related to him, and they would be of great help to him in the future. He didn't want to disappoint them. "I was the one who did it." Yu Qianqiu admitted it. Everyone had expected this. They were all puzzled. The 4 major families had always been neutral, and they never had any conflicts with any sections. So why would they attack someone at this moment? It was Yu Qianqiu, that madman. That made sense. It's you. Yuan Jiukui was slightly startled. Then anger rose in his heart. He pointed his finger and shouted, "You Qianqiu, don't you dare run amok in the cultivation world just because you're a bandit. Others give you some face, but you really think you're something? I, Yuan Jiukui, have never put a clown like you in my eyes. How dare a scoundrel like you mess around in front of my Six Paths demon sect? Elder brother Yuan, don't be angry, don't be angry." Qiu Wuyuan flashed over, pulled Yuan Jiukui, and comforted him. "Qiu Wuyuan, get out of my way." Yuan Jiukui swung his arm, turned around, pointed at Qiu Wuyuan's nose and scolded, "I've always heard that you and this scoundrel are brothers. It's because of people like you that this scoundrel can run amok in the cultivation world. Don't call me elder brother in the future, or it will dirty my ears." Scram. Yuan Jiukui's words could be said to have hit the hearts of the people present. Although Yu Qianqiu was happy in the cultivation world, the sects that had been in the cultivation world for many years didn't really look up to Yu Qianqiu. If it wasn't for the ambiguous attitude of Fuxian Island and 10,000 demons towards Yu Qianqiu, someone would have already made a move on Yu Qianqiu. Not to mention that Yu Qianqiu had the support of the four major families. Yuan Jiukui's words were like a wake-up call to Yu Qianqiu. When he looked at the people in charge of the other sects, almost all of them looked down on him. Clearly, they all agreed with Yuan Jiukui's words. Yu Qianqiu immediately understood his position in the cultivation world. When he suddenly attacked someone at the entrance earlier, he subconsciously thought that he was afraid of anyone because he was a scoundrel. He thought he was impressive, but in the eyes of the people with a certain level of status in the large sects, they did not look up to him at all. He could only scare those little disciples who didn't have much of a cultivation base. "How dare you!" Just when Yuan Jiukui told Qiu Wuyuan to piss off, four bellows rang out. The four generals of the Mo family in black furs arrived with a flash and surrounded Yuan Jiukui. Yuan Jiukui glanced around and snorted coldly. 9 people immediately shot out from the crowd and surrounded the 4 generals of the Mo family. They were clearly from the Hexapath demon sect. "When I was dominating the world, the 4 of you were still slaves to Yan Wuchen. Yet you dare to yell at me now. Are you trying to rebel?" Yuan Jiukui sneered. Then he waved his hand at the 9 people from the Hexapath demon sect and called out, "Leave. I'd like to see just what the 4 generals of the 10,000 demons are capable of." The domineering nature of a demonic cultivator was completely revealed in just a few words. Everyone was slightly speechless. It seemed like Yuan Jiukui wanted to deal with the 4 generals of the Mo family alone. The people from the Hexapath demon sect did not say anything else and backed down. After being called slaves, the 4 generals of the Mo family remained cold. They were not angered at all, but they began to radiate with pressing killing intent. Qiu Wuyuan was not a good-tempered person either, but his expression immediately returned to normal. He immediately yelled out, "Stop messing around, all of you back off." Hearing that, the 4 generals of the Mo family immediately flashed behind him. They did not even hesitate at all. "Brother Yuan, calm down. Let's talk things out. There's nothing that can't be resolved." Qiu Wuyuan was already giving face by saying something like that after being scolded. Otherwise, there was no reason for the 10,000 demons to be afraid of Yuan Jiukui with their status in the demonic sections. "That's right. Now that we're facing a great enemy, let's just bear with it for now." When Zhongping from the Blood Demon Palace originally wanted to watch the show between the 10,000 demons, but seeing that Qiu Wuyuan had given in, he knew that he couldn't watch it anymore, so he stood up and said something nice. After all, the righteous sects wanted to watch the show between the demonic sects more than him. The demonic sects could watch it, but the righteous sects could not. When Ziyi saw that Yu Qianqiu was in a daze after being scolded, her pretty face immediately turned cold. Senior Bai's disciple was not someone that could be scolded. She stood up and slowly walked towards Yuan Jiukui. The whole place instantly became incomparably quiet. Yuan Jiukui vigilantly looked back, and his pupils shrank. He immediately turned around and got into a fighting stance. He could look down on Yu Qianqiu, but he didn't dare to look down on Ziyi. This mysterious woman had fought against 7 experts in the final phase of tribulation passing. He knew that he was no match for her, but he couldn't lose the reputation of the hexapath demon sect. Qiu Wuyuan and Wen Zhongping looked at each other. This woman was not an ordinary person. Her background was mysterious, and they didn't know what her temper was like. The two of them didn't know what to do. Yuan Jiukui stared at Yu Qianqiu and sneered. A scoundrel is a scoundrel. He actually needs a woman to stand up for him. Yuan Jiukui, watch your mouth. What's wrong with a woman? A woman's voice sounded. In the field, 10 disciples in white from the Moon Clan stood up. The leading woman flashed over. It was Hua Yinyue, the elder of the Moon Clan. Hua Yinyue had already received a message from Jade Flower Fairy, asking her to protect Yu Qianqiu and Zi to the best of her ability. Yuan Jiukui's words just now finally gave her an excuse. The righteous people were all stunned. How come things were getting more and more complicated? Originally, they only wanted to see the diabolism become a joke, but now even the righteous people were involved. In a second, everyone understood. Yu Qianqiu and Zi had joined the Cultivation Alliance with the Moon Clan as their guarantor. The Moon Clan was using this as a pretext to make a fuss. The Fuxian Island and the Moon Clan had always been on good terms. Quan Deming also couldn't sit still. He flashed between the two groups and comforted. Everyone, let's talk this out. Don't be impulsive. The matter of Yan Bugui's challenge hasn't been decided yet. If we start fighting among ourselves, we'll become a laughingstock. Being blocked by a group of women, Yuan Jiukui himself was also stunned. Zi, come back. Yu Qianqiu's voice attracted everyone's attention. He walked forward and bowed deeply to Yuan Jiukui. Senior Yuan, please calm down. I was too impulsive just now. Please forgive me. He had thought it through. He had to lower his head when it was necessary. Otherwise, it would be hard for him to integrate into this circle. If he didn't integrate into this circle, it would be hard for him to find a chance to make a fortune. He had to bear with it even if he felt uncomfortable. When his strength matured, he would be able to deal with anyone he wanted. When the various sects heard his words, they immediately felt that it was strange. This madman had always been unforgiving when he had the upper hand. Currently, with the appearance of Zi and the others, it was clear that he had already gained the upper hand. Yet, he still ran out to apologize with such a sincere attitude. It was truly surprising. Qiu Wuyuan stared at Yu Qianqiu with sparkling eyes. He wondered if he had seen wrongly. Although Yuan Jiukui's attitude was commendable, he had crippled a disciple of the Six Paths Devil sect. Naturally, Yuan Jiukui wouldn't let this matter rest just because of an apology. Yuan Jiukui glared at Lin Yun and said, "Are you trying to let this matter go with just a sentence? May I know what this junior should do to appease senior?" Yu Qianqiu asked respectfully. Yuan Jiukui's gaze slowly shifted to Lin Yun's leg. He said in a solemn voice, "I won't say anything else. You broke the left leg of my disciple. If you can break your own leg, this old man will be able to answer to the sect when I return. This old man can also guarantee that the Six Paths Devil sect will treat this matter as if it never happened." The people of the four major clans also stood behind Yu Qianqiu when they heard this. They glared at Yuan Jiukui. The legs of a little disciple with low cultivation actually wanted to trade for the legs of their old ancestors' direct disciple. If they allowed this to happen, they wouldn't be able to return to the four major clans anymore. Zi looked at Yu Qianqiu with an expressionless face. As long as he gave the signal, she would immediately make a move. The other sects also felt that Yuan Jiukui's condition was a bit too harsh. They suspected that he didn't know how to appreciate favors. Sure enough, Yu Qianqiu's expression sank in an instant. He rubbed his nose as he looked at the crowd and sneered. "It's not difficult for me to break one of my legs, but I have something to ask all of you. Although the four great clans and I arrived a bit late, it's fine if everyone provoked and insulted us at the entrance. After all, we were the ones who were rude first." He suddenly turned around and pointed at Yuan Jiukui. He shouted, "But what gives a disciple of the Six Paths Devil sect the right to spit on my face in public? If I spit on your face, will you attack me? I'm afraid you'll even have the heart to kill me, right? There's such a thing? Then he's really asking for a beating." Everyone immediately whispered in each other's ears. Everyone had indeed heard the commotion outside. provoking and insulting the four clans. In such a chaotic situation, there was no guarantee that some naughty disciples would spit on the four clans. Yuan Jiukui was startled when he heard that. How did the Six Paths Devil sect become the ones who stirred up trouble first? But after thinking about it, he was afraid that it was really possible. He paused and said with some uncertainty, "That's not possible." Hee. I've never been afraid of anyone. Yu Qianqiu looked around and sneered. I know that everyone has a lot of misunderstandings about me, causing my reputation in the cultivation world to be bad. But I'm not a deranged person. How could I randomly grab someone and beat them? If Senior Yuan doesn't believe me, why don't you summon the disciple who was beaten? I can confront him directly. Who is right and who is wrong will naturally be clear. Chapter 388. Yuan Jiukui's expression became gloomy. He wasn't completely clueless about that disciple, and he knew that the disciple wasn't very virtuous. But now, as Yu Qianqiu had said, he wanted to interrogate the disciple and find out that his side was in the wrong first. If that happened, wouldn't he become a laughingstock? Most importantly, he thought that he was in the right and offended several groups of people. He even threw away the face of the Devil Path's leader, the 10,000 demons. If the truth came out, and it was disadvantageous to his side, he would be embarrassed. While he was hesitating, many people could see his apprehension. Qiu Yuan winked at Wen Zhongping and pulled Yuan Jiukui with a smile. Old brother Yuan, for my sake, this matter ends here. Don't pursue it anymore. I'll send someone to treat that disciple's injury, and I'll definitely return him a healthy leg. That's right. Old brother Yuan, personal grudges are a small matter, but take the big picture into consideration. Wen Zhongping also persuaded. Yuan Jiukui naturally understood that these two demonic cultivators were taking the opportunity to give him a way out. If he didn't appreciate it, then he wouldn't know how to appreciate a favor. But he didn't know if Yu Qianqiu would fight to the bitter end. This guy was famous for being merciless. Yuan Jiukui looked at Yu Qianqiu. Qiu Yuan understood his meaning, so he walked over to Yu Qianqiu with a smile, patted his shoulder and said, Old brother Yu, give this old brother some face and forget it. How about we end this matter here? Since Senior Qiu has spoken, we can swallow this small grievance. Yu Qianqiu also looked at Yuan Jiukui and said, I wonder if Senior Yuan still wants to pursue this matter. Humph. Yuan Jiukui snorted heavily, then flashed back to his original position and sat down cross-legged. His attitude was obvious, indicating that he wouldn't pursue this matter any further. What are you snorting about? Let's see if you still dare to snort when this father destroys your Six Paths demon sect one day. Yu Qianqiu's brows twitched. It's better if this father doesn't pursue this matter, then I won't waste my breath. He also turned around and returned to his seat. It's all right, it's all right. Everyone, return to your positions. Qiu Yuan waved his hand at the crowd and smiled. The group of people returned to their positions, and this matter was over for the time being. Ziyi was still feeling quite indignant. She looked at Yu Qianqiu beside her and wondered what had happened to him. Yesterday, he had smashed someone's counter because of a single sentence, and today he was scolded in the nose and endured it. Yu Qianqiu had already put this matter aside for the time being. He had thought that the discussion between the various sects had already ended, but who would have thought that it was still going on? He had no idea what had happened for it to take such a long time. He sat at the back and listened for a while before he understood. It turns out that this time, Yanbugui brought 2 Tribulation Realm cultivators with him, as well as 50 Tribulation Realm cultivators. A total of 53 people came to Baihua Palace, intending to reunite with Baihua Fairy as husband and wife. In the end, they were obstructed by the various sects led by the supporting Immortal Island. At that time, both sides almost came to blows. It was unknown what Yanbugui was thinking, but when he had the upper hand, he forcefully endured it. Actually, everyone understood that Yanbugui wasn't ready to officially turn against the Chinese cultivation world yet. He was probably still waiting for the foreign cultivation world's reinforcements to arrive, and the foreign cultivation world was probably also coordinating this matter. And the Chinese cultivation world wasn't ready either. The main reason was that there were too many sects, so it was hard for them to reach a consensus. The main problem was that once a fight broke out, who would contribute how much money, how much manpower, and who would be the commander? The righteous sects didn't feel at ease handing over manpower and money to the demonic sects, and vice versa. In fact, no one felt at ease handing over their own things to others. A large-scale war wasn't just a fight between two people. Once a winner was decided, they would have to be prepared for a long period of time. The longer it lasted, the more spirit stones and manpower would be consumed, and that would be a huge number. Although all the sects had stored a lot of spirit stones for emergencies, no one would take out their money for no reason. Who didn't hope that they would contribute less money and manpower, while others would contribute more? After the war, the strength of the sects might be reshuffled. Everyone wanted to preserve their strength. The foreign cultivation world on Yanbugui's side, as well as the Chinese cultivation world, were probably facing the same awkward situation, so they didn't start fighting for the time being. In short, whoever was ready first would make the first move. That was for sure. If they couldn't officially turn against each other, they could at least do something like east wind west wind, dampening the other party's morale. And so last night, Yanbugui suddenly sent someone to deliver a challenge Jade archive to the Cultivation Alliance. The content was very simple. Both sides would send their people to fight 20 rounds. Regardless of whether they were dead or alive, the winner would be determined by the number of wins and losses. The loser would have to pay 1 billion high-grade spirit stones to the winner. Of course, the challenge couldn't be without rules. It was impossible for one side to send an early-stage tribulation-passing cultivator to fight, while the other side sent a late-stage tribulation-passing cultivator to kill the other side. That wouldn't be a challenge. It would be no different from seeking death. Yanbugui's letter of challenge stated that either side could send their people to challenge the other side first. One person could go on stage repeatedly, but the person sent by the challenge side couldn't have a higher cultivation level than the challenger. Of course, if the challenge side was willing to send someone with a lower cultivation level to die, the opposing side naturally wouldn't have any objections. That night, the Chinese cultivation world replied, "Accept the challenge." This was something that couldn't be avoided. Whoever dared to say the word, avoid, would probably be drowned in spittle. But 1 billion high-grade spirit stones couldn't possibly be given to a single sect. When it came to apportioning the money and manpower, it would be a little difficult. Anyone could make the argument, but the key was which sect would contribute the money and manpower. Thus, after discussing for half a day, they still couldn't come up with a solution. In short, everyone had thousands of reasons, all of which were for them to contribute less. 1 billion high-grade spirit stones. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, his eyes almost emitted a green light, and he and Purple Dress looked at each other in unison. Yanbugui came from the 10,000 demons, and now he has become the scourge of the Chinese cultivation world. For this challenge, the 10,000 demons can't absolve themselves from the blame. I'm not saying that the 10,000 demons will pay all of the 1 billion high-grade spirit stones, but the 10,000 demons still have to pay the most. Before Deluo Sect's Zhu Xianxian could finish, Qiu Wuyuan jumped up and scolded. T. Yanbugui has long established his own sect. He is him, and the 10,000 demons is 10,000 demons. If the Deluo sect doesn't want to pay, then just say it. Don't always use this as an excuse. This is the whole Chinese cultivation world's business, not the 10,000 demons' business. Qiu Wuyuan, what you said is wrong. Why didn't someone like Yanbugui come from other sects, but from the 10,000 demons? If it wasn't for the 10,000 demons' lack of discipline, this wouldn't have happened. I think Elder Zhu is right. The 10,000 demons should pay the most. The one who said this was the Sword Faction's Elder Duan Tianbua, who was ranked 4th in the righteous sections. That's right. That's right. A group of righteous sects echoed, and they all pointed their spears at the 10,000 demons. The expressions of the demons kept changing. Logically speaking, they should be supporting the 10,000 demons, but only the 10,000 demons could be used against them. If they had to pay more, then so be it. After all, the 10,000 demons had a lot of money, So this amount of money was nothing. Yu Qianqiu finally understood. No wonder he saw Qiu Wuyuan's face the moment he came in. He had become the target of everyone's attacks. Zai Yan Bugui had caused trouble, and now the 10,000 demons had become the scapegoat. It was really hard on Qiu Wuyuan, who had been running around outside. Duan Tianbua, you're not a good person either. You call yourself a righteous sect, but you're faster than anyone else when something happens. Fine. If you think that this has nothing to do with your sword faction, then please withdraw from the Cultivation Alliance. We, the 10,000 demons, will pay for your sword faction's money. Qiu Wuyuan pointed at Duan Tianbua's nose and scolded him. Then he looked around at the crowd and patted his chest loudly. If the righteous sects think that this has nothing to do with you, you can all withdraw from the Cultivation Alliance. We, the 10,000 demons, will pay for the righteous sects' money. A bunch of shameless people who call themselves righteous sects. Tui. Qiu Wuyuan argued with the crowd. He was so angry that his face was red. After he said those harsh words, a few righteous sects immediately stood up and said, Qiu Wuyuan, speak clearly. Who are you calling shameless? I'm calling a bunch of cowards. Whoever wants to cower in this matter, I'll scold them. Whoever wants to fight, I'll play with them. Qiu Wuyuan was too lazy to argue anymore. He could not argue clearly anyway. He would die of exhaustion if he kept arguing with so many people. He happened to glance at Yu Qianqiu just now, and his heart lit up. Although he was not as good with words as Yu Qianqiu and could always reason, he could learn from Yu Qianqiu and act shamelessly, right? Who can still snatch money from me? As soon as the righteous sects stood up, there was no need to mention the 4 generals of the demon clan. A few other sects from the demon clan also stood up. It was fine if they just talked about it, but if they really fought, the other sects from the demon clan would definitely not let the 10,000 demons suffer losses. This time it was lively. As one of the sects stood up, the second one stood up. In the end, the situation of the 10,000 demons alone became a situation where the righteous and the demon clan were fighting. Qiu Wuyuan's pressure was instantly reduced. He glanced at Yu Qianqiu, who was pinching his chin and watching the show. He thought to himself, no wonder this guy could always stir up big trouble with just a little bit of it. This shameless method was just a try, and immediately one family's problem became everyone's problem. At the same time, he could also save himself some trouble. It was worth learning. The situation was a little out of control. The 4 great clans had always been neutral. They did not belong to the demon clan or the righteous clan. A few people looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was pinching his chin, and decided to just watch the show. Yu Qianqiu was very happy in his heart. The representatives from the various sects really did not disappoint the sections. They did their best to fight for the greatest benefits for their sections. Everyone, please calm down. I have an idea, but I don't know if everyone is willing to listen to it. Quan Deming from Fuxian Island saw that the commotion was getting out of hand. He frowned and thought for a while, then immediately shouted. Hearing that there was an idea, and it might even be related to their sects, everyone immediately quieted down and looked at Quan Deming. The latter waved his hand and said, Everyone sit down. It's not a solution to keep arguing like this. Listen to me slowly. Qiu Wuyuan took the lead and sat down first. After everyone started arguing, he did not say anything. Instead, he stayed out of it. The people from the various sects also sat down one after another. Chapter 389. Quan Deming stood out like a crane in a flock of chickens. He scanned the crowd and said slowly, if possible, the top 10 sects of the righteous and demon sects should share the 1 billion. Before he could finish, Yuan Jiukui laughed and said, That's not a good idea. How can our wealth compare to your supporting Immortal Island? This seems to be unfair. Brother Yuan, why don't you listen to Elder Quan first? I believe Elder Quan won't speak without thinking. Qiu Wuyuan stopped him. In fact, even if there was nothing else, he would agree with this. 20 sects would share 1 billion, and each sect would only get 50 million. This was worth it. All right, I'll listen to supporting Xian Island's opinion. Yuan Jiukui smiled disapprovingly. Quan Deming nodded and said, 1 billion is not a small number, But it would be a joke to ask the entire Chinese cultivation world to share it. My suggestion is that supporting Xian Island and 10,000 demons each contribute 100 million. Daoyuo sect, Moon sect, Blood Demon Palace, and Corpse sect each contribute 50 million. Our 6 sects will take 400 million, and the remaining 600 million will be shared by the other 14 sections. What do you all think? Hearing this, other than the top 10 sects of the righteous and demon sects, the other sects all nodded in agreement. They were not allowed to contribute even 1 spiritual stone. It would be strange if they didn't agree. I think it's fine. Qiu Wuyuan also stood up and patted his chest. 10,000 demons will contribute this 100 million. 100 million was far better than 10,000 demons. Plus, 10,000 demons was the leader of the demonic sects, so it was reasonable for them to contribute a little more than the other sections. A leader should have the bearing of a leader. I think it's fine. The Daoyuo sect, Moon sect, Blood Demon Palace, and Corpse sect naturally wouldn't have any objections. First of all, Fuxian Island and 10,000 demons offered twice as much as them. Second, with their status in the cultivation world, offering 50 million was just an average amount. If they still had any objections, it would be too unreasonable. The other 14 sects felt that it was not worth it. The 600 million would be divided among the 14 sects, and each sect would have to share more than 40 million. It was not much different from 20 sects sharing it equally, but most people agreed. It would not be difficult for them to fork out this amount of money. In addition, the few leading sects had already agreed, so it would not be good for anyone to say no. Thus, it was equivalent to tacitly agreeing. Elder Quan, since we have all paid, how should we divide the 1 billion high-grade spirit stones if we win? Yuan Jiukui suddenly asked. The other sects also stared at Quan Deming. That's right. The matter of splitting the money had to be made clear. Otherwise there would be problems later on. That's easy. Quan Deming said eloquently. There are only 20 matches in total. Since 20 sects have paid up, I believe that it won't be a problem for 20 of our sects to randomly send out 20 people. The 20 sects that have paid up can all send their people up to fight. If they win, the sect that pays the money will take back the money that the other sects have to share. The 1 billion earned will be divided into 20 portions. As long as the sect wins 1 match, they will get 50 million. The number of matches they win will be the same. If the sect wins all 20 matches, they will take all the 1 billion earned. My supporting Immortal Island will not have any objections. If we lose in the end, everyone can only admit that they are useless. They will definitely not give us the money for free. Everyone roared with laughter. This was a fair method, so no one had any objections. At least, if they won, they would not lose money. In addition, of course, the more effort they put in, the more benefits they would get. This logic was reasonable everywhere. Just when everyone thought the problem had been solved, Yuan Jiukui suddenly stood up and said, I still feel that something is wrong. This was a good method, and it was already considered fair. What was wrong with it? Qiu Wuyuan turned around and said with a slight frown, Brother Yuan, could it be that you have another brilliant idea? Yuan Jiukui pointed at the 4 major families and said in a clear voice, the combined strength of the 4 major families is not weaker than some of the top 10 sections. I think the 4 major families should also participate. The remaining 600 million will be divided equally among the 15 families. Each family will get 40 million, which is just right. He suddenly realized that something was wrong. How could he easily believe the words of that scoundrel, Yu Qianqiu? But he had tacitly agreed not to pursue the matter. Thinking about it, he felt uncomfortable. When he remembered that the 4 major families were on the same side as Yu Qianqiu, he came up with this idea. If they won this challenge, they could talk about it later. If they lost, they could let the 4 major families lose some money. It could also make those people feel disgusted. Everyone knew that Yuan Jiukui still had grievances in his heart. They all looked at the 4 major families. Presumably, the 4 major families would not be able to refuse in this situation. Sure enough, Baishan stood up and said, although the 4 major families do not belong to the righteous or demonic sects, we are also part of China. It is reasonable for us to contribute money. After saying that, he sat down. This was also a sign of agreement. Yu Qianqiu was happy in his heart. He was worried that he could not find an excuse to intervene and make money. Now the opportunity came to him. That kid outside did not beat him for nothing. Since the 4 major families have agreed, if there is no other objection, then this matter is settled. Quan Deming asked Qiu Wuyuan, "Elder Qiu, what do you think?" "I have no objection. Just let me know when you want to pay. 10,000 demons will not refuse." Qiu Wuyuan laughed. He was in a good mood now that a troublesome matter had been solved. Quan Deming nodded and said to the crowd, "The other party has more than 50 experts in the crossing calamity stage and 2 in the final stage. If you want to take this opportunity to make money, you might as well call for experts from your sect. This is much faster than us working hard to earn spirit stones from the spirit stone mine." Everyone laughed and suddenly became spirited, as if it was not difficult to make money. Most people felt that this matter did not concern them, and finally did not have to worry. After the matter was settled, the group of people dispersed, leaving a large pile of praying mats on the ground. Naturally, the unlucky disciples on duty would come to clean it up. Ignoring the strange gazes of the outsiders, Yu Qianqiu and the others followed Bai Shan to the Bai family's shop. They had something to discuss. There were some decorations here, so their conversation would not be easily overheard. The shopkeeper of the Bai family's shop had already heard about Yu Qianqiu beating people at the entrance of the Cultivation Alliance. He was speechless when he saw him. It was hard to imagine how the family could be entangled with such a person. After leading them to the back, the shopkeeper left. The matters of the higher-ups were not something that a shopkeeper like him could care about. The date set by the Cultivation Alliance in Yanbugue was tomorrow. Remembering that the other party had 2 experts in the final stage of the crossing calamity stage, after a discussion, Bai Shan said solemnly, "Since we have agreed to participate, we must prevent accidents. I will send a message back now and ask the family to invite 2 elders to come here overnight in case of emergencies." The others also nodded and felt that this was appropriate. Unexpectedly, Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands and laughed. "That is too troublesome. Why bother 2 elders to come here overnight? I have an idea, but I don't know if I should say it." Wasn't he talking nonsense? If he said it, how could the people of the 4 families not let him say it? The attitude of the 8 people immediately became respectful. Bai Shan cupped his hands and said, "If you have something to say, please say it. We are all ears." Ha 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 ha. Yu Qianqiu couldn't stop laughing shyly. He seemed to be a little embarrassed. After a while he rubbed his hands and said, "This is what I think. For this challenge, the 4 families just need to put their names on it. I will pay the 40 million, and Ze and I will fight. You don't have to worry about it. As for that, if we win, haha, you know that I am a little short of money. We can keep the money we win for the time being. What do you think of my idea?" For money again. The few people looked at each other. Bai Shan looked at him and said suspiciously, "I wonder what stage has Mr.'s cultivation reached? Please tell us, so that we can be prepared." Ha! Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, "I am really ashamed. I am still in the early stage of nascent soul." The few people looked at each other and didn't say anything. Although it was already very fast for him to reach this stage at his age, this challenge was not a trivial matter. It was not a matter of life and death. Bai Shan shook his head and said, "Please forgive me, mister. I dare not let you take this risk. If there is any accident, I really can't explain to the family." "What are you afraid of? Isn't Luo Qingtian at the crossing calamity stage? Didn't you still lose to me in the end? You don't have to worry. It is settled. Send the news back. If the 4 families have any objections, let them come to me. You don't need to explain anything." Yu Qianqiu seemed to be more interested in money than his life. He turned around and said to Ze, "Ze, I will leave the last stage of the crossing calamity stage to you. Do you have the confidence to win?" "Yes." Ze nodded. At the side, Bai Zitsong and the other 3 looked at Ze with complicated expressions. There was a hint of admiration in their gazes. She was beautiful, pure, and had an extraordinary temperament. In addition, She had a high cultivation base and a mysterious background. She was indeed quite tempting. This time, the four of them had been sent here to build a good relationship with Yu Qianqiu. However, at the same time, they had received a rather ambiguous mission. If possible, it would be best if they could develop feelings for Ziyi. Other than Wu Liqing, the other three were a little unwilling at first because they had never seen her before. Who knew what kind of person she was? But they also knew that for a big family like theirs, sometimes they couldn't make decisions about relationships. However, when they saw Ziyi, they were all attracted. They didn't expect a cultivator in the last stage of the crossing calamity stage to be so young and beautiful. They were immediately attracted. However, such a beautiful woman was ordered around by Yu Qianqiu as a maid. It was really a pity. However, they were relieved. Yu Qianqiu clearly didn't have any other relationship with Ziyi. When you attack, don't be soft. If you can kill them, don't let them go. Even if you let them go, they won't be grateful. Before you go, think about what my master did when 16 soul-forming cultivators joined hands to fight against him. As long as they are your opponents, don't let any of them go. Don't be soft. Kill them all. Yu Qianqiu warned earnestly. He was afraid that Ziyi would be soft because she didn't have much experience. In a battle of life and death, she would be at a disadvantage. This girl was most convinced by Bai Changchun. At this time, he could only bring up Bai Changchun to strengthen her confidence. However, when these words fell into the ears of the four families, they were shocked. They all knew who Yu Qianqiu's master was. In other words, their ancestors' cultivation was so strong that it was shocking. Chapter 390. Ziyi's gaze instantly became firm, and she nodded her head seriously. Bai Shan cupped his hands and bowed to Yu Qianqiu excitedly. Sir, can you tell us in detail about the Battle of the East Sea that you mentioned just now? The people of the four great clans all cast expectant gazes at Yu Qianqiu. The legendary Battle of the Soul Formation stage was indeed worthy of admiration. Furthermore, the most powerful protagonists were their own relatives, so the anticipation was even stronger. Tell you in detail? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He thought to himself, I heard it from Nongzhu, that old handsome guy. How can I tell you in detail? He looked serious and sighed. I can only be fascinated. It's indescribable. Indescribable. That kind of realm is beyond our reach. Let's not talk about it. Ziyi rarely spoke in front of outsiders. At this moment, she clenched her fists and said in a woman's voice, Elder Bai is undoubtedly the most powerful cultivator in the world. Ziyi will admire you for life. Her words were even more inspiring than Yu Qianqiu's. The people from the four major families were extremely excited, especially the people from the Bai family. They blushed and couldn't express their emotions for a long time. Ziyi, let's go back. Yu Qianqiu turned around and kept shaking his head and sighing as if he had really seen the battle. Ziyi followed him and left, leaving the people from the four major families to daydream. They imagined how the thin elder in the portrait in the ancestral hall of their family looked in reality. He was undoubtedly the most powerful cultivator in the world. If I can't see our ancestor once in this life, I, Bai Zizong, will regret it for the rest of my life. Bai Zizong, who had been standing in silence for a long time, suddenly said while gritting his teeth. Bai Shan let out a long sigh and said, It's not easy to see our ancestor. Didn't you hear what your father said? The great ancestor was the punishment enforcer of the demon ghost realm, and lived in the center of the demon ghost realm. Even if you were at the end of the tribulation transcendence stage, you would not be able to go deep into the demon ghost realm, let alone the place where the great ancestor lived. If you really want to go, the only way is to rely on Yu Qianqiu. If Yu Qianqiu is willing to introduce you, it shouldn't be a big problem. Bai Zizong suddenly turned his head and said, Third uncle, if Li Cheng and the other three could be personally taught by our ancestor, once we succeed in our cultivation, we would be able to learn 1/100th of our ancestor's abilities. Who in the Chinese cultivation world would dare to make things difficult for us? I don't understand why the old ancestor would not care about his own descendants, and instead accept an outsider as a personal disciple. Could it be that none of us descendants can enter the old ancestor's eyes? This sudden statement stunned the people of the four families. Tan Fei, Wu Liqing, and Jingzhua all breathed rapidly. Needless to say, it would be beneficial to be taught by the great ancestor of the world's #1 expert. When the four heirs thought of the extraordinary purple dress following beside Yu Qianqiu, their expressions became a little strange. How dare you? Bai Shan suddenly shouted. Bai Zizong, are you out of your mind? How can the great ancestor's thoughts be guessed by ordinary people? The great ancestor must have his own reasons for doing this. It's not something you can comment on. Third uncle, don't tell me you still don't understand? Bai Zizong pointed in the direction where the two of them went and said angrily. Who is the hidden force behind him? Could he really comprehend such a mysterious and strange technique by himself? Who gave him those two treasured sabers? Without a doubt, all of these were given to him by the great ancestor. Otherwise, how could a lowly disciple like him surpass our cultivation base in such a short period of time? He dares to do whatever he wants in the cultivation world because he has the great ancestor's support. I don't understand why the great ancestor would do this. Jealousy always makes people lose their minds easily. When Yu Qianqiu was just a lowly disciple, Bai Shan could still bow down to him. Now Yu Qianqiu was higher than him in every aspect. Even his seniority was higher than him. When he saw that Ziyi was obedient to Yu Qianqiu's words, an unknown fire completely ignited the dissatisfaction in his heart. Although Wu Liqing and the other two had similar thoughts, they never had such strong feelings. They were stunned by Bai Zizong's words. They did not expect Bai Zizong to say something like this. Tan Huazong, Jing Xingping, and Wu Anfeng looked at each other. Bai Shan was trembling with anger. He pointed his finger and yelled, "Bastard, kneel down!" Bai Zizong clenched his teeth and kneeled in front of Bai Shan. His expression showed his unwillingness. Bai Shan said bitterly, "Without the great ancestor, there would be no four major clans. Jealousy blinds your eyes. You can't achieve anything. How dare you talk about the great ancestor's right and wrong? Do you think you're qualified to take over the Bai clan in the future? You treacherous bastard, slap yourself." Slap, slap, slap. Bai Zizong slapped his own mouth without saying anything. He slapped his own mouth again and again. Wu Liqing and the other two did not know what to do. Tan Huazong and the other two quickly advised, "Brother Bai, it's enough to teach him a lesson. It's understandable for a young man to say something rash. You don't have to go overboard." Bai Zizong, who was slapping himself, suddenly stopped. He touched his face, shook his head and smiled bitterly. He kowtowed to Bai Shan and said, "Third uncle, I know I'm wrong. I was blinded by jealousy just now and said something rash. Please forgive me." The few of them were speechless by his sudden change. Yanbu Gui and the Cultivation Alliance's challenge location was in a mountain not too far away from the 100 Flowers Valley. To be exact, it should be in a valley surrounded by mountains. It took some effort to choose this place. People could stand around and watch, and the spacious valley in the middle was just right for the fight. There were probably thousands of people on the surrounding mountains. This was the result of the sects restraining their disciples. Otherwise, there would be more people coming to watch the fight. On Yanbugui's side, there were about 50 people including himself. From their clothes, most of them were cultivators from other clans. These dozens of people stood on the mountaintop facing the many cultivators, but they did not show any fear. It was as if they were looking down on the cultivators of China. Both sides had already sent people to the middle to discuss the start of the fight. Ever since Yanbu Gui found out that Yu Qianqiu was among the crowd on the opposite mountaintop, his eyes rarely moved, filled with hatred. If it wasn't for this guy, his family wouldn't be in such an awkward situation. The husband and wife couldn't be together. They colluded with other clans to protect themselves, and even their sect became enemies. Now that they had reached a point where it was either win or die, there was no way out. How could Yu Qianqiu not notice Yanbu Gui, who was the center of attention? Seeing that he kept staring at him, he didn't want to compete with Yanbu Gui with his stare, but it was uncomfortable to be stared at like that. He looked around and found the position of the 10,000 demons. They were not far away, so he slowly walked to the side of Qiu Wuyuan and bowed. "Greetings, Senior Qiu." Greetings, greetings, greetings." Qiu Wuyuan looked him up and down. When did this guy become so proactive? It seemed like he was always the one looking for him first. Therefore, with a stomach full of questions, he asked, "Brother Yu, are you looking for me?" The 10,000 demons also looked at him. Haha. Nothing, nothing. Yu Qianqiu looked around with a face full of smiles. The weather today is really good. The 10,000 demons were not in a good mood. None of them were happy that the son of the previous sect leader had caused such trouble. Thinking about the possibility of fighting him again, they felt even more depressed. At this moment, Yu Qianqiu came over to talk about the weather. The group looked at the sky and felt that it was normal. They didn't notice anything special, but they suspected that there was a deeper meaning behind his words. They were all confused. "Are you really okay?" Qiu Wuyuan asked doubtfully. I'm fine. Yu Qianqiu confirmed it again. Then he was too lazy to talk nonsense beside Qiu Wuyuan. He seemed to be chatting happily with the 10,000 demons from time to time, creating a harmonious atmosphere. The 10,000 demons reluctantly answered him. They didn't have the mood to talk nonsense with him now. But when this scene fell into the eyes of Yan Bugui, who was on the opposite mountain, he was so disgusted that he almost broke his teeth from gritting them. What the hell is this guy doing? Qiu Wuyuan cursed silently. The more Yu Qianqiu said that he was fine, the more suspicious he became. He and Yu Qianqiu had known each other for a long time. At that time, Yu Qianqiu hadn't joined Fuxian Island yet. Once they met, Yu Qianqiu started to flatter Qiu Wuyuan. Qiu Wuyuan already knew that this guy wasn't a good person. What happened later also confirmed his guess. Now that he suddenly acted like this, Qiu Wuyuan started to look around suspiciously. When his eyes met the hateful eyes on the opposite mountain, he was stunned. Then he understood everything. This guy was obviously using the 10,000 demons to make Yan Bugui angry. He was vicious. Qiu Wuyuan looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was still talking nonsense with the 10,000 demons. His expression changed. He said in a low voice, "Yu Qianqiu, you've achieved your goal. Go back to your position." Senior Qiu, what do you mean by that? Yu Qianqiu pretended to be confused. Please go back. Qiu Wuyuan raised his hand and said bluntly. The dignified Myriad Demon's Palace, the leader of the demonic path, had been used by this fellow like a bunch of blind people. How could they possibly have the nerve to explain themselves so clearly? Yu Qianqiu's expression darkened. He said in a cold voice, "It seems that I'm not welcome in the 10,000 demons. I originally wanted to shamelessly ask to join the 10,000 demons after the competition. That's why I came here to get in touch with you guys. It seems that I was thinking too much. Elder Qiu, please help me thank Palace Leader Bu for inviting me in person. It's not that I don't know what's good for me, but the threshold to join the 10,000 demons is too high. Yu Qianqiu can't cross it. Goodbye." He waved his hand and walked away. The 10,000 demons looked at Qiu Wuyuan in surprise. For someone like Yu Qianqiu, who had mysterious skills and a spiritual treasure, the 10,000 demons couldn't wait to recruit him. "Why did you chase him away?" One of the late tribulation cultivators who rushed here overnight asked in a low voice. "Qiu Wuyuan, what's going on?" Qiu Wuyuan was speechless. He thought to himself, did I really think too much and misunderstand? If this guy really wants to join the 10,000 demons, then I... Chapter 391. Some people who were paying attention to Yu Qianqiu saw him strolling to the 10,000 demons side and chatting happily with the top demonic factions people. But for some reason, he came back with a long face. The people from the 4 clans looked at each other. Ziyi stared at him for a while and finally couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong?" Yu Qianqiu expressionlessly said, "Nothing, I just solved a small problem." Ziyi frowned. Why was he still unhappy after solving the problem? She wasn't a talkative person, so she didn't ask. She followed everyone's gaze to the valley. The challenge was about to begin. Both sides seemed to have reached an agreement. Each side handed over 1 billion spirit stones to a middleman, the 10,000 demons. Right now, the only middleman that could be accepted by both sides was the 10,000 demons. Everything that needed to be prepared was ready, so there was nothing to be said. There wasn't even anyone to judge. It seemed that this kind of battle to the death didn't need anyone to judge. The rules had already been set. Apart from the people who escaped from the valley, the rest had no other choice. One of them died, and the other lived. It was easy to determine the winner and loser. However, once they went on stage, the possibility of them escaping was very low. No sect could afford to lose face like this. They would definitely punish the people who escaped after the battle. The top 10 sects of the righteous and demonic sects had already gathered their experts, especially the supporting Immortal Island. They had 2 experts at the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, and 10 experts at the tribulation passing stage from the cultivation pavilion. Dongfang Chang, Ao was one of them. It was obvious that the supporting Immortal Island was complacent and wanted to use this challenge to prove their position as the top sect in the world. The 10,000 demons, the leader of the demonic faction, was destined to be unable to compete with the supporting Immortal Island in this matter. Those who knew a little about the cultivation world knew that the supporting Immortal Island was in the hands of the Guan clan, while the 10,000 demons were in the hands of the Yan clan. Yan Bugui was the only son of the 10,000 demons' previous leader Yan Wuchen, and the current leader Bu Yunxiao's senior brother. If Yan Wuchen didn't die, the 10,000 demons wouldn't dare to do anything to him. After the spirit stones were handed over, the valley quieted down. There was only the sound of the mountain wind. Everyone was looking around, not knowing who would be the first to challenge, and who would be the first to accept the challenge. Damn. What were they waiting for? Yu Qianqiu looked around, wishing he could go up first. Unfortunately, his cultivation level was too low. If he went up first, his opponent's cultivation levels would be above the crossing tribulation stage. According to the rules, they wouldn't be able to challenge him, so going up first would be pointless. According to the rules, those with high cultivation bases could not challenge those with low cultivation bases, while those with low cultivation bases could challenge those with high cultivation bases. However, it seemed that the possibility of the second scenario happening was very low, because it was practically courting death. China's cultivation world didn't know much about the foreign cultivation world, so the sects wanted to send someone to explore the world first before making a move. Yan Bugui, on the other hand, knew the situation of China's cultivation world very well. He wanted to see who would go first before sending someone to deal with the challenge. This was one of the reasons why he was determined to win. The mentality of both sides caused a temporary stalemate. Yu Qianqiu decided to wait a little longer when he thought about the possibility of earning 50 million. If no one went up, he would let Ziyi go. At this moment, Dongfang Chang, Ao of the supporting Immortal Island slowly took out a golden spear from his storage bag, attracting everyone's attention. It seemed like the supporting Immortal Island was going to be the first to fight. The supporting Immortal Island was known as the top sect in the world. It might not matter to other sects if this stalemate continued, but the supporting Immortal Island couldn't do this because it was the top sect in the world. Dongfang Chang, Ao had been representing the image of the supporting Immortal Island for a long time, so he had to fight first. It's him again. Yu Qianqiu stared at Dongfang Chang, Ao with a trace of pity in his eyes. He couldn't help but sigh. Dongfang Chang, Ao was simply a desperate man of the supporting Immortal Island. He was always at the forefront. Sigh. Heroes would eventually reach their twilight, and even a fine horse would stumble. If this went on, he was destined to become a tragic figure. A figure flashed, and Dongfang Chang, Ao was already standing in the middle of the valley. The luxurious grass covered him up to his knees. He held his spear and shouted, "Middle stage tribulation passing cultivator of the supporting Immortal Island, Dongfang Chang Ao, accepts the challenge. Who wants to die?" His last sentence was especially sonorous, and his voice echoed in the valley for a long time. Good. Someone shouted. Everyone looked toward the source of the voice, and saw Yu Qianqiu taking the lead in clapping and clamoring. Everyone was slightly stunned. Someone from the Cultivation Alliance immediately followed suit. Then, the cheers and applause were continuous, and the atmosphere was immediately livened up. Yu Qianqiu didn't mean anything else. First of all, there was finally someone to light up the fire. Second of all, Dongfang Chang, Ao was a real man in his heart. The applause and cheers were not wrong for him. Zi looked at Yu Qianqiu in surprise. She didn't expect the crowd to have such a big reaction. Driven by the atmosphere, she couldn't help but applaud. Wu Liqing and the other two looked at Bai Zizong. Bai Zizong smiled bitterly at them and applauded. Dongfeng Chang. Ao tilted his head and looked at Yu Qianqiu. He nodded and thanked him. It was enough for a man to be cheered by another man for something that he had held onto for his whole life. In the end, he met Qiu Wuyuan of the 10,000 demons. These two represented the leaders of the righteous and evil sects. For the glory of their sects, they fought for everything and never gave in. Qiu Wuyuan looked at Dongfeng Chang, Ao with an inexplicable expression. He sighed slightly and looked away. This was the first time he gave in to Dongfeng Chang, Ao. Only the two of them could understand that kind of feeling. Yu Qianqiu's atmosphere was getting stronger. Dongfeng Chang, Ao's fighting spirit increased. He suddenly turned around and pointed at Yan Bugui and the others on a mountain. He shouted, Dongfeng Chang, Ao is here. Who wants to fight me? But this time, there was no need for anyone to take the lead. The crowd had already pushed the applause and cheers to the climax. Yan Bugui retracted his resentful gaze from Yu Qianqiu. He looked around and snorted coldly. He slowly walked in front of a person and said in a deep voice, Mr. Yan, I'm sure you've heard of this person. He can be considered a famous figure in Fuxian Island. His golden source spear is an upper-grade magical treasure. He rarely has a match. Although your cultivation is similar to his, and the black dragon whip in your hand can more or less restrain the spear, don't underestimate him. I'll leave this battle to you. I've long wanted to meet this person. The cultivator called Mr. Yin chuckled. He gently pulled on a long black whip that was tied to his naked upper body, and it smoothly slid into his hand before coiling into a bundle. He swept down from the mountain, and stood about 10 meters away from Dongfeng Chang Ao. He chuckled and said, Xiushui country's tribulation-passing middle-stage cultivator, Yan Biao, is here to challenge you. As soon as he arrived, the surrounding area immediately quieted down. All eyes were focused on the two of them. When Dongfeng Chang, Ao saw the whip in Yan Biao's hand, he slightly raised his eyebrows. He raised his spear and shouted, Foreign cultivator, how dare you mess with the Chinese cultivation world? Die. The spear turned into a phantom and smashed down. Dongfeng Chang, Ao made the first move. With a loud boom, a long deep hole appeared on the ground. The air wave sent the surrounding weeds flying. Yan Biao couldn't be hit just like that. He had already disappeared. I've long heard of Dongfeng Chang, Ao's great name. Now that I see it, you're so clumsy. The voice came from the sky. Yan Biao stopped in the air. The long whip in his hand had already been released. It was like a spirit snake flying in the air. It was extremely nimble. The people of the Cultivation Alliance were shocked. The Chinese cultivation world was good at using flying swords, but this was the first time they had seen someone using a whip. The two late-stage tribulation-passing elders of Fuxian Island were called Jin Yan and Fan Benlei. Their faces revealed a faint trace of worry. The whip could restrain the spear. In addition, it could be used like a sword. They were afraid that Dongfeng Chang, Ao would be in danger. Dongfeng Chang, Ao didn't even raise his head. He straightened his spear and pierced the sky. Whoosh! A golden light shot out from the spearhead and shot toward Yan Biao. While Yan Biao was speaking, his hands were already forming messy hand seals. The long black whip coiled up in the air. The raised whip head was pitch black like a cone, as if it was refined from a beast's horn or tooth. When the golden light shot over, Yan Biao didn't dodge. He pointed his finger, and the long whip whizzed out. The cone-like whip head directly collided with the golden light. Bang! A wave of air exploded. The golden light shot out from the spear was instantly defeated in the air. The long whip, however, shot toward Dongfeng Chang, Ao like an arrow. Everyone watching was shocked by the sharpness of the whip. At the same time, they were worried for the person below. Dongfeng Changgao raised his head and took a glance. Then he shot into the sky and swung his spear horizontally. With a pung sound, he directly knocked away the whip and raised his spear to chase after Yan Biao in the sky. The latter smiled ferociously. He raised his hand and pointed. Dongfeng Chang, Ao suddenly felt that something was wrong. He quickly glanced to his left and right. Suddenly he heard a whoosh sound coming from behind him. He looked back and saw that the whip that he had just knocked away was coming again. Bang! He turned around and raised his spear to knock the whip away again. But the whip was just knocked away. It bounced in the air and came back to life. In the blink of an eye, it wrapped around him again. Dongfeng Chang, Ao didn't have time to care about Yan Biao. He waved his spear and fought with the strange whip. On the other hand, Yan Biao, who was in the air, only needed to control the whip with ease. Dongfeng Chang, Ao was already at a disadvantage. If this continued, he would consume too much of his true essence. If his reaction was a little slow, he was afraid that he would be at a disadvantage. Yu Qianqiu could see that Dongfeng Chang, Ao wasn't really inferior to that guy. The key was that the guy's whip was too strange. It couldn't be killed or broken. It was really entangled. Dongfeng Chang, Ao couldn't display his strength at all. Damn it. No one knew what would happen next. Losing one more round might decide the outcome of the battle. This was related to the ownership of 1 billion yuan. I've invested 40 million yuan. I can't lose money no matter what. Yu Qianqiu frowned. He suddenly turned to Bai Shan and asked, if someone threw a treasure down the mountain and happened to be picked up by Dongfeng Chang Ao, it wouldn't be against the rules, right? Ah. Bai Shan looked at him in shock. He didn't know what he meant. Chapter 392. The people at the side immediately reacted and thought of his two unusually sharp sabers. Could it be that he wanted to throw his sabers out for Dongfeng Chang, Ao to use? It seemed that the sabers could not be taken away by others. Bai Shan pondered for a moment and said, if someone accidentally drops something down the mountain, as long as they don't interfere with the battle, it shouldn't be considered a violation of the rules as to who picked it up and who used it. Accidentally? Yu Qianqiu looked at Bai Shan and laughed, thinking to himself that this guy really knew how to talk. Looking back at the battle site, the crackling sounds echoed in the valley. Dongfeng Chang, Ao was still entangled with the whip. Whether it was the spear in his hand that was sharp enough to provoke or smash, it could not hurt the whip at all. Needless to say, to be able to resist the spear in Dongfeng Chang, Ao's hand, this whip must be an upper-grade magical weapon. The whip was strong and flexible in the air. The head and tail of the whip coordinated with each other to attack. As soon as the tip of the whip was knocked away by the spear, the tail of the whip pierced through the air, causing Dongfeng Chang, Ao to be extremely busy. It was as if he was in a muddy pond, unable to escape and unable to use his strength. He did not even have the chance to fight with Yan Biao. However, it was not easy for the whip to hit Dongfeng Chang Ao. At least under the situation where Dongfeng Chang, Ao could still sustain his energy consumption, no matter how fierce the whip's attack was, it could not get close to him. However, Yan Biao was still smiling as he looked at Dongfeng Chang, Ao, who was entangled with the whip. He was very leisurely making hand seals. Great! Yan Bugui and the others at the mountain top also applauded and cheered. If this continued, they would definitely win the first round. The people of the Cultivation Alliance did not look too good, especially those from supporting Xian Island. Losing the first battle would not only affect the Wuxia cultivation world and supporting Xian Island, but also Dongfeng Chang, Ao would have to live in seclusion on supporting Xian Island for a long time. He would never be able to represent supporting Xian Island again. Hearing the arrogant shouts coming from the other side, Dongfeng Chang, Ao was enraged. He knew what it would mean if he lost this battle. Therefore, with a red face, he let out a loud shout, then consumed a great deal of Zhen Yuan to continuously shoot out a sharp golden light from the spearhead. Finally, he managed to force the snake-like whip to retreat for a while. His bloodshot eyes glared at the sky, and Dongfeng Chang, Ao seized the chance to quickly raise his spear and charge forward. Yan Biao was shocked. Actually, he himself was clearly aware that if he didn't rely on the sharpness of his whip, his strength would probably be much inferior to his opponent. Now that his opponent had not completely fallen into a hopeless situation, he ignored the rapid consumption of Zhen Yuan and escaped. He didn't have any magical treasures in his hands. Once his opponent caught up with him, wouldn't it be a dead end? He quickly made hand seals to recall the black dragon whip, and his body also quickly dodged. The golden light from Dongfang Chang, Ao's spear barely brushed past his feet, and Yan Biao was immediately scared out of his wits. What a fast speed! His opponent's strength was indeed a notch higher than his. Just a little bit more and he would have lost both his feet. Yan Bugui and the others were also shocked. Since his opponent had dodged, he had already lost the chance to chase after him. The long whip had already caught up with him, and Dongfang Chang, Ao was once again trapped in the shadow of the whip. He also understood that once the counterattack just now failed, his opponent would not give him a chance to suddenly get close to him again. The sudden change in the situation made the Cultivation Alliance's morale rise. They didn't expect that they would still fail, and their hearts fell to the bottom again. How could everyone not see that Dongfang Chang, Ao probably had no chance to win anymore? And now it was just a battle of attrition. Countless people shook their heads in pity for Dongfang Chang Ao. He was obviously strong, but he was tormented by a whip until he couldn't use his strength. They were afraid that the outcome was already decided. Qiu Yuan of the 10,000 demons had been staring at the figure entangled by the whip in midair. His eyes were wide open, and they were also bloodshot. His fists were clenched so tightly that there was a muffled sound, and his chest was heaving up and down violently. His opponent of many years might die in such an unjust battle. He suddenly felt that there was a stuffiness in his chest that he couldn't breathe out, and he was about to suffocate to death. He didn't know why either. The situation was grim. It's time to negotiate. Dongfang Chang Ao, you'll have to fight one more time. Yu Qianqiu pursed his lips. While everyone was watching with rapt attention, he walked out swaggeringly, and slowly walked to the side of the people from supporting Xian Island. There was still someone in the mood to stroll at this time, and it naturally attracted many people's attention. It was this guy again. Previously, he went to the 10,000 demon side, and this time he came to supporting Xian Island's side. What was he trying to do? Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything. The mountain was a little sloped, and he stood under the eyes of the people from supporting Xian Island, silently watching Dongfang Chang, Ao brandishing his long whip. The people from supporting Xian Island looked at each other, not knowing what this guy was doing here at this time. Quan Deming was currently the representative here, and he couldn't help but ask, Yu Qianqiu, what's the matter? Yu Qianqiu looked back in a daze, and then looked left and right as if he had accidentally walked here. He immediately walked up and moved to Quan Deming's side, cupped his fist slightly and said, Elder Quan, I have something to ask. I noticed that Elder Dongfang's strength is obviously stronger than Yan Biao, but his spear is restrained by that long whip. I have something I don't understand. Don't you have any treasures that can break this long whip? If you do, why not throw it into the battlefield now? As long as you don't interfere with the duel, it won't be against the rules. Quan Deming turned around to look at the two consecrators behind him and frowned. I don't know what this whip is made of, but it's soft and not strenuous at all. It's not something that can be countered by ordinary treasures, unless there's an exceptionally sharp treasure that can break it in one fell swoop. It's not that our supporting Xian Island doesn't have such treasures, but they aren't in our hands at the moment, and it's too late to go back and get them. At this point, Quan Deming suddenly stopped talking, and everyone from supporting Xian Island also looked at Yu Qianqiu. Speaking of the sharpness of treasures, who had seen a treasure sharper than Yu Qianqiu's sabers? Even the sword of Deluosek's sect master was easily cut into 3 pieces, so it shouldn't be a problem to deal with this whip. Everyone's eyes lit up, but they immediately remembered that not everyone could pick up the sabers. Dongfang Chang, Ao had also tried, but he couldn't pick it up at all. Thinking about it was a waste of time, and everyone shook their heads in regret. Yu Qianqiu nodded, and he rubbed his chin as he muttered, Speaking of spears, I do have a treasure spear here. Although it's not as strong as my sabers, its sharpness isn't inferior to the sabers, and it might even be better. I just don't know if it can break this long whip. He wasn't afraid that people from other sects would hear him, because if someone released their divine senses to listen in, they would be discovered by supporting Xian Island. His words were no less than a sweet bait, and everyone's eyes lit up. There was actually a treasure spear that was sharper than his sabers, so how could it not break the long whip? Quan Deming was astounded and he asked, Yu Qianqiu, is what you said true? Yu Qianqiu silently turned around and he frowned. Elder Quan, this isn't the first time we've met, so when have you seen me lie? His tone was a little unhappy. That's not what I meant. Quan Deming explained. What I meant was, can you take out your treasure spear and let us take a look at it? Yu Qianqiu looked at the situation of the battle, and he reckoned that Dongfang Chang, Ao would be able to hold on for a while longer. Thus he shook his head and sighed. Sigh. I have a few good treasures with me, and they were all given to me by a senior. He once told me that unless it's an emergency, I can't simply show these treasures to others, and I can't give them to others to use without permission. I've already promised him, so it's not convenient for me to break my promise. May I know which senior it is? Why don't you tell us? Perhaps he has a good relationship with supporting Xian Island, Quan Deming said. He has been in seclusion for many years, so I'm afraid you won't know him. Yu Qianqiu thought of a person, and he casually made up a story, Nanming Old Ancestor. While Quan Deming was still thinking, the two consecrators at the end of the tribulation passing stage behind him exclaimed, What? It's him. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. F***ck. I've blown my trumpet. There's really someone in supporting Xian Island who knows Nanming Old Ancestor? Quan Deming turned around and bowed. Consecrators, is there really such a person? Why haven't I heard of him before? Jin Yan said with a solemn expression. It's normal that you haven't heard of him. This person was a person from over 1,000 years ago, and he was a wandering cultivator who hid in the cultivation world. Over 1,000 years ago, when the sect leader of supporting Xian Island went out for a tour, he coincidentally met an expert at the end of the tribulation passing stage. Not only was this person's cultivation level profound, but he was also a top-notch expert in smithing. His smithing skills were simply extraordinary and wonderful. Sect leader Ren wanted to befriend him, but the other party was unwilling to acknowledge him. In the end, sect leader Ren asked for his name, but the other party only said, Nanming Old Ancestor, and left. After that, supporting Xian Island sent people to secretly investigate this Nanming Old Ancestor. But it's a pity that we didn't have the chance to meet him again. That's right. Fan Benlei nodded and said. Most people don't even know about this. I've only seen it in the secret records of Nurturing Heart Pavilion. According to sect leader Ren's description, with the smithing skills of that Nanming Old Ancestor, it shouldn't be difficult for him to forge a treasure spear. But this was already a matter from over 1,000 years ago. If this person is really still alive, then wouldn't he be over 1,000 years old? When everyone heard this, they immediately thought of a possibility. If that person was still alive, wouldn't his cultivation level have already reached the legendary soul formation stage? Think about it. Even if Yu Qianqiu was spouting nonsense, it couldn't be so coincidental. Putting aside the fact that the name was the same, to be able to take out such a treasure, wouldn't it coincide with the secret of Nanming Old Ancestor being a smithing expert? Like I said, I've only heard of this Nanming Old Ancestor from He Li. How could you possibly know him? Yu Qianqiu's brows moved slightly, and he suddenly sighed and said, Your sect leader Ren really missed the opportunity to meet Nanming Old Ancestor. This Nanming Old Ancestor, he loves spirit stones. If supporting Xian Island's sect leader Ren could lure him with spirit stones, it wouldn't be difficult to make him stay on your supporting Xian Island. He did give me some treasures, but it's a pity that he forced me to search for spirit stones for him. I'm really worried to death. If Nanming Old Ancestor really heard this, he would probably jump in anger. Who said I love spirit stones? I don't even know who Yu Qianqiu are. When did I force you to search for spirit stones? Chapter 393. Ancestor Nanming likes spirit stones? The people of supporting Immortal's Island finally understood why Yu Qianqiu and the purple-clothed lady were so frantically accumulating wealth after their appearance. It turned out that there was an inside story. Jin Yan and Fan Benlei looked at each other. While Yu Qianqiu was looking at the duel in midair, they gave Quan Deming a look. Quan Deming nodded his head in understanding. He turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, Yu Qianqiu, can we borrow that spear for a while? Yu Qianqiu paused and said with some difficulty, I know what you mean. You want to borrow the spear for Elder Dongfeng to use, but I promised Ancestor Nanming that I can't easily take out the treasures he bestowed, and I can't let others use them without permission. Otherwise, it's very likely that he will take them back. Elder Quan, you have to know that I'm prepared to use these treasures to save my life at a critical moment. If they were to be taken back, what would I do when I encounter danger in the future? Most importantly, I've always kept my promises. You guys better think of another way. We can pay spirit stones to rent it from Ancestor Nanming. What do you think? Quan Deming said. Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly and said, Elder Quan, it's not that I don't want to promise you, but Ancestor is at the ends of the earth. Even if you rent it from him, I'm afraid that by the time you get the news that he agrees, it'll be too late. Do you think it's still necessary? Can you make this decision on behalf of Ancestor Nanming? Quan Deming asked. Me? Yu Qianqiu pointed at himself and then fell silent. He seemed to be thinking about something in the silence. After a while he nodded, but then he shook his head and said, As long as there are spirit stones, I can make the decision. But you guys don't know Ancestor Nanming's character. He won't care about a small amount. His appetite is a little big. It was unknown whether he was feeling guilty when he said this. Was it the Nanming ancestor whom he had never met that had a huge appetite? Or was it him who had a huge appetite? Quan Deming glanced at Dongfeng Chang, Ao, who was fighting in grief and indignation. With a firm expression, he said, Name a number that the Nanming ancestor can accept. As long as it's not too outrageous, we won't make things difficult for you. The greatest significance of supporting Immortal Island's first appearance was not to win spirit stones, but to save face. For the #1 sect in the world, reputation was sometimes more important than spirit stones. Ze and the people from the 4 major clans were no longer in the mood to watch the fight. From time to time, they would look at the people from supporting Xian Island. They didn't know what Yu Qianqiu was doing with the people from supporting Xian Island. He kept talking nonstop. As for Bai Zizong and the other 3 who were standing at the back, their gazes often stopped on the graceful silhouette of the lady in purple in front of them, sinking deeper and deeper. Yuan Jiukui from the 6 Paths Demon Sect had questioned the disciple who was beaten yesterday, but that disciple refused to admit that he spat on Yu Qianqiu. As a result, Yuan Jiukui's hateful gaze couldn't leave Yu Qianqiu today. Now that he had finished visiting the 10,000 demons side, he went to the supporting Xian Islands side. At first, he thought that this kid was really capable to be able to win over both the righteous and demonic sections. But now he felt that something was wrong. Yuan Jiukui looked at the scene doubtfully. Dongfeng Chang, Ao was in imminent danger, but the people from supporting Xian Island were busy chatting with Yu Qianqiu. Even the 2 consecrators in the final stage of the tribulation passing realm were hitting on him. This was like seeing a ghost. Could it be that supporting Xian Island wasn't worried about Dongfeng Chang, Ao's safety at all? Impossible. Dongfeng Chang, Ao represented the face of supporting Xian Island. This huge doubt made Yuan Jiukui feel as if he had been enlightened. He couldn't help but regret his impulsive actions yesterday. Supporting Xian Island and the 10,000 demons were not kind people. Since the 2 sects and Yu Qianqiu were so accommodating, they must know something that others didn't. It seemed like he had to spend more effort to investigate. Otherwise, it would be too late to regret when he suffered a loss. Yu Qianqiu lowered his head and pondered when he heard this. He thought to himself, I've played hard to get, so I'm not going to play anymore? Not only will they not believe me, they will also say that I'm greedy. It's not good to play too much. It'll be bad if I lose everything. So he let out a sigh and nodded solemnly. Okay. Since Elder Quan has already put it this way, I'll brace up my courage and make a decision on behalf of Ancestor Nanming. A fixed price of 50 million high-grade spiritual stones is really the lowest I can go. Ancestor Nanming really won't be interested in anything less than this. You can decide for yourselves. It would cost 50 million just to rent it. Even if supporting Immortal Island saved up this amount of money, it would still take many years. The people of supporting Xian Island looked at each other, but they couldn't delay any longer. Dongfeng Chang, Ao's safety and supporting Xian Island's face were worth more than 50 million. Jin Yan said in a deep voice. Yu Qianqiu, I promise you on behalf of supporting Xian Island. However, I have to say something first. What if the spear isn't as sharp as you said and we make a mistake? I've never lied. Is Senior doubting my credibility? Fine, I'll risk the treasure being taken back by ancestor Nanming. I'll say this here. If the spear's sharpness isn't what I said, you don't have to give me a single spiritual stone. Yu Qianqiu's face was full of righteousness, and his words were filled with awe-inspiring righteousness. Jin Yan nodded. All right, it's settled then. However, we don't have that many spiritual stones on us, so we'll have to temporarily Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and interrupted him. It's fine to give it to you after the matter is over. I've been on supporting Xian Island for so many years, so I have some confidence in supporting Xian Island. However, I have to make it clear in advance that the spear can't be used by you indefinitely. It's only for Elder Dongfang's match. Supporting Xian Island had never thought of taking his things. Moreover, since Yu Qianqiu was so straightforward, Jin Yan immediately agreed. All right, let's use the spear. I have to remind everyone that Ancestor Nanming is afraid that people will pry into the secrets of the treasures he refined, so he set up extremely powerful restrictions on them. I've asked him to set up the same restrictions on my 2 treasured sabers, so you must not use your divine senses to check them. Once your divine senses come into contact with them, they'll be immediately damaged, Yu Qianqiu warned. Everyone from supporting Xian Island was astonished. It turned out that the reason why the 2 sabers could hurt people's divine senses was because of the restrictions. There was actually such a powerful restriction in this world. That ancestor Nanming really wasn't someone an ordinary person could compare to. After everyone agreed, Yu Qianqiu put his hand into his storage bag. After searching for a while, he suddenly muttered strangely. Could it be that I forgot to bring it with me? That's impossible. When everyone heard this, they almost fainted. After wasting so much time talking, he actually said that he forgot to bring it with him. Jin Yan's face was ashen as he said, Yu Qianqiu, are you kidding me? Look carefully. Oh. I found it, Yu Qianqiu shouted. He didn't mean to dawdle, but the huge sabers that he made with his black flames were a little too crude. This time, since he was pretending to be the spear refined by ancestor Nanming, he naturally had to look like a treasure spear. Otherwise, if they were all crudely made, it would be strange if they didn't suspect that they came from the same family. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to fool them even if he wanted to. Thus, after some preparation, he put his hand into his storage bag and used his black flames to carefully suppress it. That was why he spent some time. Everyone from supporting Xian Island's gaze followed Yu Qianqiu's hand as it slowly moved. This action instantly attracted the attention of everyone on the surrounding mountains. What were those fellows from supporting Xian Island doing? Dongfang Chang. Ao was fighting with his life on the line. Could it be that they still had the mood to do something else? The spear's tail that was slowly pulled out was black. It was formed by 2 malevolent beast claws, and the fine scales on the claws were vivid and lifelike. The spear's tail had just been revealed when a terrifying feeling of deterrence emanated from the storage bag. Yu Qianqiu suddenly pulled out the spear and casually inserted it into the ground beside him. With a pu sound, even the spear's tail could easily be inserted into the mountain rocks. The spear's body was about 2 meters long, and it was completely black. The spear's shaft was as thick as a child's arm, and it looked like it was covered in scales. Upon closer inspection, it turned out that there were 9 angry dragon carvings bearing their fangs and brandishing their claws. They looked as if they were about to leap out of the spear's shaft. From the front, the spear's blade looked like a flat dragon head opening its mouth and roaring angrily at the sky. The spear's blade had broken through the dragon's fangs and emerged from the dragon's open mouth. On top of the original 2-meter-long spear's body, there was a sharp edge that was half a meter long. The center of the spear bulged out while the edges were thin, and it even carried a dense barb. The spear's entire body was pitch black, and it didn't reflect any light in the sunlight. It was truly a mystery what it had been forged from. The moment this spear appeared, the people from supporting Xian Island felt like they had to retreat before even trying it out. and they couldn't help but gasp. Needless to say, just this meticulous carving and this concealed aura meant that this was undoubtedly a treasured spear. The people standing closer to the spear could clearly see the fierce spearhead, and were left speechless. Those farther away were also trying to figure it out. Yu Qianqiu examined the spear's design, and was very satisfied with it. In his rush just now, he had recalled the image of the red dragon in Twilight Valley, and applied it to this spear. As expected, the spear's aura was extraordinary. How could he not praise such a masterpiece? Yu Qianqiu coughed and solemnly said, "When this spear first took shape, someone used it to kill a 9,000-year-old flood dragon that was on the verge of ascending. Afterwards, the Southbright ancestor placed 9 dragons on the spear's body, calling it the dragon-slaying spear. The dragon slayer who used this spear once praised that the supreme cultivator's treasured spear slays dragons. No one in the world dares to disobey, and the heavenly sword does not appear." The dragon-slaying spear? This spear once slaughtered a flood dragon that was on the verge of ascending. Fan Benlei said in disbelief. The people from supporting Xian Island also stared at the spear, and Jin Yan asked in shock, "The heavenly sword does not appear, and who can contend with it? Does this mean that there is another heavenly spear that can contend with the dragon-slaying spear?" That heavenly sword refers to the heavenly sword, not the spear, but it's also incredibly sharp, Yu Qianqiu somewhat awkwardly explained. He thought to himself, "I can't talk nonsense anymore. If I continue, great hero Jin will be so angry that he transmigrates to settle the score with me." He quickly changed the topic and said, "Everyone, shouldn't you quickly hand the spear over to Elder Dongfang? If we continue to talk, I'm afraid there will be a problem." Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Only now did they remember that they were only looking at the spear, and they neglected the desperate Dongfang Chang, Ao. Jin Yan and Fan Benlei nodded at Quan Deming at the same time. Quan Deming grabbed the spear, and instantly felt a bone-piercing cold. He couldn't help but praise, "Good spear." Everyone stepped aside, and Quan Deming walked out with the spear in hand. He transmitted his voice to Dongfang Chang Ao. "Elder Dongfang, don't panic. We have already found you the peerless godly weapon dragon-slaying spear. It will definitely be able to break that strange whip. You must remember, the restriction on this spear is extremely powerful. As long as you don't use your divine sense to check, you will definitely be able to use it safely." Chapter 394. Dongfang Chang Ao, who was trying his best to deal with Quan Deming, took the opportunity to take a glance. When he saw that Quan Deming was indeed holding a black spear in his hand, his spirit was lifted, but he was a little confused. He was good at using spears, so he paid more attention to all kinds of good spears. Where did the dragon-slaying spear come from? Why hadn't he heard of it before? When Yan Bugui saw the spear in Quan Deming's hand, his expression changed immediately. He could guess what was going to happen next. He transmitted a message to Yan Biao. "Be careful, Mr. Yan. Supporting Xian Island is going to send a spear into the battlefield. This spear might be able to break Mr.'s whip. You must not let it fall into the hands of Dongfang Chang Ao." Yan Biao stopped in midair. Although he looked relaxed, he didn't dare to get too close to Dongfang Chang Ao. He was constantly on guard, afraid that Dongfang Chang Ao would launch another sneak attack. He was really shocked just now. When he heard Yan Bugui's telepathic message, he looked towards the direction of supporting Immortal's island. As expected, there was someone holding a black spear. He couldn't help but smile and reply to Yan Bugui. "Palace Master Yan is worrying too much. The black dragon whip in our hands is made from a flood dragon that had cultivated for thousands of years. He extracted its tendons, peeled its scales, and refined its bones. How can it be broken by ordinary treasures?" Yan Bugui saw that this guy was underestimating his enemy, so he reminded him again. Supporting Xian Island is not comparable to ordinary sections. The golden source spear in Dongfang Chang Ao's hands is also an upper-grade treasure. It's just that Mr.'s black dragon whip is able to restrain it. Now that they are taking out something to replace the golden source spear, it's definitely not an ordinary treasure. "Mister, you must not be careless." Yan Biao was alert. The two people in the air were looking at the spear in Quan Deming's hand. All the sects also saw some clues and knew that supporting Xian Island had brought out a powerful treasure. Quan Deming looked at the position and transmitted a message. Elder Dongfang, get ready to pick up the spear. After saying that, he threw the spear. A black shadow drew an arc and landed on a protruding boulder at the bottom of the valley. The black spear was inserted into the rock at an oblique angle. There was almost no sound. Only the black end of the spear was exposed. All the sects were shocked. It was indeed a treasured spear. Dongfang Chang, Ao, who was fighting, was slightly delighted, while Yen Biao was slightly startled. Both of them immediately locked onto that gun. Hi! Dongfang Chang Ao shouted. He had waited for so long in order to think of a way. Now that his fellow sect members had come out to save him with a treasure, success or failure would all depend on the spear below. How could he not give it his all? The spear in his hand shot out 100 spear shadows with all his might. Golden light shone as he forced the black dragon whip away. In a flash, he quickly descended. Dongfang, don't run! Yen Biao shouted. At this time, he was also a little anxious. He made a hand seal, and the black dragon whip chased after Dongfang Chang Ao. Everyone's eyes were focused on the battle between the two. They knew that this was the crucial moment. About 100 meters above the ground, the sound of wind breaking could be heard. Dongfang Chang Ao suddenly stopped, turned around, and used all his strength to shake off the long whip with his spear. Everyone thought that he would be able to pick up the spear below. Unexpectedly, he raised his head and looked at Yen Biao, who was rushing down, and shouted, "Kill!" Then he raised the golden origin spear and rushed towards Yen Biao. His imposing manner was incomparably valiant. The two of them rushed at each other, and their speed seemed to close in an instant. Yen Biao originally wanted to use the long whip to entangle Dongfang Chang Ao so that he could keep the spear below to avoid any worries. Who knew that Dongfang Chang Ao would turn around and rush back, as if he had set up a trap for him to fall into. The sharp sound of the golden spear pierced through the air, and Yen Biao was almost scared out of his wits. He hurriedly turned around to escape, but it seemed that it was still a little too late. The two of them had already met, and following a cold snort from Dongfang Chang Ao, the golden spear drew out a rain of blood. Ah! Yen Biao screamed. One of his thighs was not able to dodge in time, and was cut off on the spot. The Cultivation Alliance immediately cheered, especially Qiu Wuyuan of 10,000 Demons, who was unusually loud and excited. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. This Dongfang Chang Ao was indeed Dongfang Chang Ao. As long as he was given a chance, he could immediately turn the situation around. This kind of wisdom and courage was definitely not comparable to ordinary people. It was no wonder that he could take on such a heavy responsibility in the world's #1 sect, Fuxian Island. Although Yen Biao had lost a leg, his life was still more important. He continued to run for his life, but his vitality was greatly injured, and his speed was already a lot slower. He desperately ran towards the direction of Yen Bugui and the others, shouting loudly, "Two senior brothers, save me!" Among the dozens of people, 2 people immediately rushed out to rescue him. Yen Bugui anxiously shouted, "Don't break the rules!" But someone beside him pulled his arm. The 2 people could not care so much now. Their junior brother was about to die. Who would care about the rules? At worst, they could just admit defeat. However, the scene that the 2 of them were most worried about still appeared. Dongfang Chang Ao had already caught up to Yen Biao. His expression was as calm as still water, and he raised his spear above Yen Biao's head. The 2 of them immediately shouted, "Show mercy!" Yen Biao turned around in horror, only to see a ray of golden light flying towards him. Dongfang Chang Ao had just used the spear 3 times, and his movements were clean and neat. He was indeed someone who had used the spear for a long time. Ah! A few pieces of minced meat and blood fell to the ground accompanied by a shrill scream. Yen Biao was finished. The Cultivation Alliance once again cheered nonstop. "Junior brother!" The 2 people who were rushing over exclaimed. The 2 people raised their hands and pulled out whips that were exactly the same as Yen Biao's. Dongfang Chang Ao turned around and left, landing on the ground at the fastest speed. Not far away, He saw the ownerless long black whip lying quietly on the ground. He raised his hand and grabbed it, then directly threw it into his storage bag. This could be considered as his spoils of war. Seeing that the two people who pulled the whips were picking up the pieces of Yan Biao's body, he looked at the broken leg in front of him. He was afraid that the other party would not let this go so easily. Dongfeng Chang, Ao first took out an energy recovery pill and swallowed it. At the same time, he stuffed the golden origin spear in his hand into his storage bag. He turned around and grabbed the black spear handle on the boulder behind him. As he grabbed it, his eyes slightly widened. He suddenly pulled out the black dragon slayer spear that was stuck on the boulder and raised it to take a closer look. The long spear was cold and pitch black. The dragon claw held the spear spine, and the 9 dragons roaming spear was like a raging dragon spitting out cold blades. The entire spear was almost covered by the fine scales of the dragon, and it looked extraordinary. In particular, there seemed to be a huge amount of power contained within it. That kind of terrifying power seemed familiar. Dongfeng Chang, Ao looked at the fellow sect members of supporting Xian Island in surprise. He had never heard of such a spear in the sect. If there was one, it would have been given to him long ago. He reckoned that it would not have dragged on until now. Elder Dongfeng, you have won the first round. The 2 consecrators have summoned you back. Dongfeng Chang, Ao suddenly received a voice transmission from Quan Deming. He nodded slightly and flew back to the people of supporting Xian Island in a flash. The surroundings were filled with cheers. The Cultivation Alliance had won the first round, and all the sects were cheering. Elder Dongfeng is indeed amazing. Yu Qianqiu praised happily. This really made him overjoyed. He had not even used the spear, and he had already earned 50 million. Even if he lost in the end, he could still earn 10 million. If he had known earlier, he would not have spent 40 million. Dongfeng Chang, Ao was startled. Why was this guy here? He nodded and did not say anything. However, Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand and said, Elder Dongfeng, please return the Dragon Slayer spear to me. This spear is yours? Dongfeng Chang, Ao looked at the fellow sect members in surprise. Finally, his eyes fell on Quan Deming. The latter nodded silently and said, I borrowed it from Yu Qianqiu for emergencies. I promised him that I would return it to him after 1 round. This. Dongfeng Chang, Ao's eyes lingered on the spear. He was a little reluctant to part with it. After a little hesitation, he said decisively, Yu Qianqiu, are you selling this spear? Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and said, No. I won't sell it no matter how much money you give me. Elder Dongfeng, please return the spear to me. At this moment, someone in the valley suddenly shouted, Middle stage tribulation passing cultivator. Yan Feng is here to accept the challenge. Dongfeng Chang Ao. Do you dare to come down and fight me? Everyone from supporting Xian Island looked over. It was none other than one of Yan Biao's senior brothers. It seemed like he wanted to take revenge. Dongfeng Chang, Ao snorted and turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, Yu Qianqiu, lend me the spear for 1 more round. I will return it to you after I use it. Chang Ao. Jin Yan stopped him and shook his head. Supporting Xian Island has to fight for the first round. Since we have already won, let the other sects do the rest. Supporting Xian Island only needs to make a move at the crucial moment. Dongfeng Chang, Ao stopped and pondered. He knew that the sects had their own considerations. He could not control his own impulse. He looked at the people at the foot of the mountain and gritted his teeth as he handed the Dragon Slayer spear in his hand to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu took it and touched it before stuffing it into his storage bag. He bowed to Jin Yan and said, After the challenge ends, I will come back to find you. Jin Yan nodded with a gloomy expression. Just touching the spear had cost supporting Immortal Island 50 million. If he had known that Dongfeng Chang Ao would kill like that, he would have just thrown something as a trigger. There was no need to waste so much money. Yu Qianqiu did not care so much. After leaving supporting Xian Island, he went back to the 4 families. Zi popped her head over and asked curiously, I saw it just now. The gun that was thrown down seems to have been taken out by you? Yu Qianqiu looked at her. It was good to have a high cultivation. So many people were blocking and yet she saw it. Actually, it was not just Zi who saw it. Many people saw it. Even if they did not see it, they would have guessed it. If supporting Xian Island really had a spear, they would have taken it out long ago. There was no need to surround him and take out a spear. If it was not his, who else could it be? Yan Biao's senior apprentice brother was still shouting. What? Dongfengchang, Ao does not dare to come out, but the whole Chinese cultivation world does not dare to come out? Are you all cowards? Who will fight me? He shouted and scolded for a long time, but no one from the sects came out. The key was that everyone knew how powerful the whip was from Dongfengchang, Ao's battle. Those with the same cultivation as Dongfengchang, Ao would not be able to deal with it better. And the cultivators in the final stage of tribulation passing couldn't come out because of the rules. For a moment, people from the sects looked at each other. That whip was troublesome. Yu Qianqiu looked left and right for a long time. Seeing that everyone was still hesitating, he could not help but laugh. Hee. Since everyone is so polite, I won't be polite. Ziyi's eyes brightened. You want to go up? His fighting style was always so novel. She liked watching it. What do you think? We can't let people laugh at us Chinese cultivation world for not having anyone. Yu Qianqiu's mouth twitched as he drew a machete in each hand and shouted. I'm coming. Chapter 395. To shout like that at this time, it would be the center of attention. Baishan still wanted to persuade him, but it was too late. A silhouette dashed down the mountain. He didn't fly but rather he leaped. Holding two knives bigger than a human, he fanned himself and rushed down the mountain like a bat, his movements extremely fast. Although the crowd did not see clearly who it was, who else could it be other than Yu Qianqiu, who came from the four great families and held such strange knives? All the sects looked at each other, speechless, and felt a little ashamed. So many sects, but no one came out to fight, forcing a guy who could not fly to run and jump down to fight. How could they not feel ashamed? They were afraid that they would not be able to avoid a round of humiliation. Yan Feng's junior brother died, and he wanted to find someone to vent his anger, but he did not expect that the one who came to challenge him was a guy who could not even fly, and looked very young. He was stunned for a moment, then laughed and said, Is there no one in China? Haha, young man, I don't kill nameless people. Seeing that your courage is commendable, I will spare your life. Quickly go back and call your elders. Hee. You don't know me, what a joke. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, he did not stop and directly rushed over. Be careful. Yan Bugui suddenly shouted from the top of the mountain. The stumbling Yu Qianqiu ran all the way down, and was already close to Yan Feng. Yan Feng still did not know the opponent's background, and was still laughing. Hearing the warning, Yan Feng looked around and saw that the young man who rushed over did not say anything, but raised his knife and slashed at him. His movements were quite smooth. Yan Feng sneered disdainfully, waved the whip in his hand to block, and said in a deep voice, It seems that I have to kill a nameless person today. His voice stopped abruptly. The black knife waved, and the snake-like black whip was cut into two. Yan Feng felt his neck cold, and his eyes opened wide in disbelief, but his vision had changed, and he saw his chin on the cold and wide knife. The young man did not hesitate to wave the other knife, and split a headless body in half, and his vision gradually blurred. The whole place was silent. Even the sound of the wind seemed to have quietened down. Only the words of the young man with the saber could be heard. Yu Qianqiu stood with his saber in front of him, looking at the head that had died with its eyes wide open. He said expressionlessly, So what if he's famous or not? One saber is enough. With a twist of the blade, the head fell off. Yu Qianqiu quickly went over to take the storage bag from the corpse and put it away. Then he turned around and ran back up the mountain with the two broadswords. What was the point of staying here if he didn't run after the fight? Safety first. When Yu Qianqiu ran back to the four great clans and put away the two sabers, everyone still felt as if they were in a dream. Running down just like that, chopping people down with one slash, then running back, and it was over just like that? Junior brother. A sorrowful howl came from the mountain where Yan Bugui was. The last of the three brothers landed in a flash. Good. The people of the Cultivation Alliance reacted, and immediately cheered loudly. When had they ever seen such a classic battle? Going down the mountain only needed one slash to cut off the head of a mid-stage tribulation passing expert, and then turning back it only took a moment. It was so cool that they had no words to say. Especially the last sentence. So what if he's famous or not? One saber is enough. It pushed everyone's emotions to a climax. The applause was explosive, and Ze, who was stunned and then came back to her senses, kept clapping. Looking at the people around her, her face showed a smile that had never been seen before. Elder Bai's disciple was really extraordinary. Everyone's eyes were focused on Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu came out in a straightforward manner, cupped his fists and bowed to the people around him saying, I was lucky, I was lucky. What he got in return was even more intense cheers. A consecrator from the 10,000 demons was called Neo-Senator. He looked at Yu Qianqiu, and suddenly said to Qiu Wuyuan in a deep voice, Qiu Wuyuan, he originally wanted to join the 10,000 demons, but you chased him away. After this is over, you can go and ask Yu Qianqiu if he is still willing to join the 10,000 demons. Qiu Wuyuan nodded speechlessly. The people from the supporting Immortals Island were even more amazed, shaking their heads and smiling bitterly. This guy was just wandering around here. How did he come back with a saber in the blink of an eye and kill an expert in the middle stage of the Crossing Calamity stage? Dongfang Chang, Ao recalled the scene of Yu Qianqiu cutting off the long whip with a saber and sighed. This saber is really extraordinary. I wonder how does that spear compare to it? In fact, everyone understood that the reason why Yu Qianqiu was able to kill with a saber was because the other party was careless and didn't know his background. He didn't expect that his whip could be easily cut off, so he lost his life. But for the Cultivation Alliance, this was something to gain face, so everyone was equally excited. They were right to think this way, but they didn't think about it. If it was an ordinary person, who would dare to use a saber to kill someone in the Crossing Calamity stage with a nascent soul stage cultivation? In fact, Yu Qianqiu also thought that he would have to go through a lot of trouble, but he didn't expect that the other party didn't know him, so he made a decision in the blink of an eye: kill him. People who can make such a prompt decision are not as easy as they say or think. An old man in embroidered clothes stood next to Yan Bugui. He had been staring at the purple clothes next to Yu Qianqiu, and suddenly asked, Is the person with the saber Yu Qianqiu that man who mentioned? Who else could it be other than that rascal? Yan Bugui stared at Yu Qianqiu and said with hatred, Yan Feng really underestimated his enemy too much. He was actually defeated so easily. It's not necessarily because Yan Feng underestimated his enemy. If it were me, I'm afraid I would also have made a mistake. It's the first time I've seen such a brave young man. No wonder he's so famous. The old man in embroidered clothes looked at Yu Qianqiu's eyes, revealing a sense of admiration, and asked, I heard that this Yu Qianqiu also defeated the head of China's Daoyuo sect, Luo Qingtian. Didn't you investigate his background? We did, but there's no way to find out. After this guy was expelled from Fuxian Island, he rarely appeared in the cultivation world. No one knows where he is, but he appeared again recently, Yan Bugui said. He disappeared for a period of time, but now he appears again, and he even has a treasure that ordinary people can't have. The old man in embroidered clothes looked at the purple clothes, then looked at Yu Qianqiu, and nodded thoughtfully. I'm afraid it's not that simple. Murderer, state your name. After the eldest senior martial brother collected his junior martial brother's corpse, he pointed at Yu Qianqiu and shouted, Mid-stage tribulation passing cultivator. Yanqing accepts the challenge. Who dares to fight? This was clearly telling Yu Qianqiu to go down and fight him. Damn it. With so many people watching, you want me to go down just because you tell me to? Dongfang Chang Ao also killed your junior martial brother. Why are you only looking for me? Am I easy to bully? Yu Qianqiu looked down expressionlessly, pretending that he didn't hear anything. In his heart, he was thinking that Fuxian Island wouldn't give up just like that, and they might even have to rent his spear. I was stupid just now. I can earn money for free. Why should I go down and do such a sinful thing? A bunch of cowards. Yancheng was so angry that he started cursing, and the more he cursed, the uglier it became. The more people heard, the uglier their faces became. Think about it, there were so many people here. And there were many people who were stronger than Yan Cheng, but no one came out to fight. This was really embarrassing. The key was that the opponent's whip was too powerful. Although they won the first 2 rounds, even if they asked Dongfang Chang'ao to go up, it would still be difficult for them to beat him. At the end of the day, no sect would be like Yu Qianqiu, running around with precious treasures. At present, they could only deal with the treasures in Yu Qianqiu's hands. Otherwise, they couldn't let Yu Qianqiu wait until they returned to their sects to pick out suitable treasures before they started fighting. The cursing was still going on, but no one came out to fight. Time was also passing, and if no one came out to fight after 2 hours, Yanbu Gui would take the initiative to win. Not only would they get 1 billion spirit stones, they would also be able to damage the reputation of the Chinese cultivation world. At this moment, the 10,000 demons' faces were the ugliest. The leader of the righteous sects, Fuxian Island, had won the first round, but as the leader of the evil sects, the 10,000 demons, there was no response at all. After they returned, the prestige of the 10,000 demons in the evil sects would definitely plummet. Qiu Wuyuan was now a little uneasy and restless. He wasn't confident that he could deal with that strange whip. And if he didn't fight, how would the 10,000 demons face their fellow evil sects in the future? His restlessness fell into Yanbu Gui's eyes, and a trace of bitterness flashed across Yanbu Gui's face. He gritted his teeth and sent a telepathic message to Yan Cheng, who was below. The person who killed your junior brother is called Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu? Yan Cheng suddenly pointed his finger and shouted. You coward is Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. F*CK. Who told him? He immediately looked around, looking for any suspicious people. He believed that Yanbu Gui's side, seeing that victory was in sight, and that they were about to reap rich benefits, would definitely not reveal his name and let Yan Cheng curse him. Instead, it was very likely that someone on his side was hoping that he would fight, so his name was leaked. His first thought was that he had been betrayed by someone on his side, but in the end, every sect he looked at was suspicious. Forcing me? The more it is like this, the more I won't go. Yu Qianqiu was a little angry. But Yan Cheng obviously had some understanding of Yu Qianqiu's name, as he said all kinds of nasty things. Things like disrespecting his masters, betraying one sect after another as a double surname slave. This challenge had become a war of words. All the sects looked at Yu Qianqiu, wondering how long could he endure it? Zi stared at the people below with a frosty face. It was fine if it was just 1 or 2 sentences, but if he continued to endure it, he wouldn't be able to show his face in the future. Yu Qianqiu finally couldn't listen to it anymore. With a livid face, he stepped forward and shouted. How dare you shout at me? Are you tired of living? Are you courting death? Yu Qianqiu, come down and fight if you have the guts. Yan Cheng pointed his finger and shouted. Since you're tired of living, I'll send you down there to accompany your 2 junior brothers. After Yu Qianqiu finished speaking in a cold tone, he waved his hand and a green flying sword flashed out from his sleeve, quickly carrying him into the sky. In the sky, he waved his 2 sleeves continuously, and streams of green light flew out continuously. The 2 sleeves were like storage bags, and no one knew how many flying swords were hidden in them. 1,000 flying swords danced in the sky, and the imposing manner was really shocking. Yu Qianqiu kept his sleeves. So far, with his current cultivation, controlling 1,000 flying swords at the same time was already his limit. Moreover, the green fire element in his body was almost depleted, and even if he wanted to release more swords, he couldn't release more. Chapter 396. The sunlight refracted the green shadows, and the green light flowed endlessly, covering the entire valley, causing the entire valley to sink into a hazy green light. Everyone squinted their eyes at the piercing green light, but they still couldn't conceal their shock. Rumor had it that there was an extraordinary person in the ancient times who could control 10,000 swords at the same time. The rumor was not to be believed, but now everyone had witnessed Yu Qianqiu releasing 1,000 flying swords in a fit of rage. They danced in the air and looked at the vast land like a tiger, wanting to take someone's life. Yancheng was dumbfounded as he looked up. He subconsciously felt that he had stirred up a hornet's nest. Yen Bugui and the rest looked at each other, then at Yu Qianqiu, who was coldly staring down from the sky. They all had an expression of disbelief. The people of supporting Immortal's island looked at each other. Guthyuan sword technique. Thousand swords control. Yancheng, do you know your crime? Yu Qianqiu's cold voice descended from the sky and reverberated in the valley. The flying swords above his head all stopped. The dazzling green blades slowly adjusted their direction and stared at Yancheng below. The black flame machete was able to take someone's life with a single slash. It was impossible for it to happen again. This time, he sent out all the green flame flying swords that he could control. He wanted to have a fair and square battle, to let the entire cultivation world know of his abilities, and that he did not rely on luck to establish himself. A nascent soul cultivator was actually questioning a tribulation passing stage cultivator with such a matter-of-fact tone. Everyone was speechless. They didn't know if Yancheng could withstand the power of the 1,000 swords. It seemed that these green flying swords were not ordinary flying swords. If it was them, thinking of the scene of 1,000 flying swords shooting at them at the same time, everyone subconsciously shivered. Ziyi's gaze lingered on the 1,000 flying swords. Her pretty face was filled with excitement. She clenched her fists tightly. From Yu Qianqiu's domineering aura, she seemed to see the shadow of senior Bai. The faces of the 4 major families were filled with solemn respect. The disciple of the old ancestor was not angry, but once he was angry, he would shake the world. What crime did I commit? Yancheng smacked his lips and asked dryly. His tone had changed from cursing and arrogant to cautious. When it came to life and death, it was strength that determined the opponent's attitude. Who told you my name? Yu Qianqiu glanced at the surrounding mountains and changed the topic. The moment he said that, the various sects started sizing each other up. In fact, everyone had the same suspicion as Yu Qianqiu. Yen Bugui snorted coldly and transmitted his voice to Yancheng. Mr. Yen, you don't have to hesitate. You can tell him that I told you. He had a grudge against Yu Qianqiu, so why would he care about one more dish? Although it didn't matter if he said it. How could Yancheng give him up? If he really did that, it wouldn't be a matter of him losing face, but his teacher who lived far away in Xiushui country would lose face with him. Thinking of his teacher who had reached the soul formation stage, Yancheng's confidence was boosted. He shouldn't be scared by his pretense. No matter how strong a nascent soul cultivator was, how strong could he be? So he waved his whip and shouted, Yu Qianqiu, if you want to fight then fight. Don't be so long-winded. At the end of the day he still didn't have enough confidence. Otherwise, he would have made a move long ago and wouldn't have been so long-winded. You really don't know what's good for you. In my eyes, that lousy whip of yours is no different from withered grass and rotten wood. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and raised his hand. I have 1,000 flying swords waiting for you. If you have the cultivation of the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, you might be able to escape from my 1,000 flying swords with your teleportation. Unfortunately, you're not. I'll give you one more chance to live. Tell me the person who said my name and cut off your own tongue. Then I'll let you go. Otherwise, you won't be able to see tomorrow's sunrise. After the battle with Luo Qingtian last time, Luo Qingtian's abnormal speed was so fast that even the flying swords couldn't catch up to him. It could be said that Yancheng had gained some experience. This time, the flying swords of blue fire were waiting for him in battle. They weren't afraid that Yancheng would escape to the sky. Presumptuous! Yancheng shouted loudly. His protective upstanding qi instantly surged out from his body and wrapped around himself. The long whip in his hand rose high into the air and shot towards Yu Qianqiu like a spiritual snake. You're courting death. Yu Qianqiu sneered. He pointed with his finger, and dozens of streaks of green light flashed out. Like a jackdaw fighting for food. They surrounded the long whip and tossed it around wildly. Even though the flying swords of blue fire were not as good as the flying swords of blue fire, they were still first-rate sharp. Yancheng and his 2 brothers had encountered their nemesis when they encountered Yu Qianqiu. When the black dragon whip and the flying swords of blue fire clashed, It was already pecked all over. The others didn't know, but Yanqing immediately sensed it. In his great shock, he made a hand gesture. The black dragon whip made a bam sound and swung its tail in the air. It shook off Guoshir's flying swords of blue fire. It turned around and was about to fly back. Yu Qianqiu sneered. If there was only one flying sword of blue fire, perhaps it wouldn't be able to do anything to you. However, there were 1,000 of them here. A small whip could escape to the heavens. The sword gesture was activated. Dozens of flying swords had already cut off the whip's path of retreat. A group of ferocious fellows pounced forward and pecked wildly. It was practically a standard gang fight. Yancheng's face was filled with anxiety. The black dragon whip was the weapon that he had relied on to make his name. Once it was destroyed, it would be easier said than done to find another treasured weapon that was just as handy. His hand gesture was almost a mirage. The whip scurried everywhere in midair. It dodged left and right, shook its head and swung its tail. However, Yu Qianqiu's nimbleness in controlling the flying swords was not inferior to his control of the whip. Once the black dragon whip shook off Guoshir's flying swords, there would be flying swords that were ready to pounce on Guoshir's head, peck at his tail, and pinch at his waist. There was no way for him to escape. He did not allow the whip to escape. He pestered it relentlessly and wrapped it tightly. The divine whip that was previously feared by all the sects was now in such a sorry state. It had no way to escape. Everyone was speechless when they saw this. The people of supporting Immortal's island looked at each other again and again. Ever since Yu Qianqiu had used the Guyuan sword technique on supporting Immortal's island, everyone had actually studied this sword technique in detail. However, the conclusion that everyone had reached was that it was gaudy. They all felt that it was not practical. Now that 1,000 swords had appeared, just this imposing manner alone was already extraordinary. If they could achieve the effect of Yu Qianqiu's usage, even if the quality of the flying swords was not as good as this green flying sword, imagine if someone was entangled by 1,000 flying swords and ganged up on, just like how this whip was entangled. Apart from a few people who possessed great cultivation base, how many people could escape easily? Moreover, Yu Qianqiu's cultivation base was only at the nascent soul stage. If it was a cultivator at the crossing calamity stage who was controlling it, what kind of consequences would there be? Just thinking about it made people feel expectant. They were guarding the treasured sword technique left behind by their ancestors without realizing it. Everyone had made an error of judgment. The people of supporting Immortal's island suddenly came to their senses and nodded silently at each other. They decided that when they returned to the sect, they would definitely report this matter to the sect leader. They had to pay attention to the Guyuan sword technique. Yancheng was still trying his best to make hand seals, attempting to use his last effort to save the black dragon whip. However, under the watchful eyes of everyone, the sharp tail of the whip, which was either refined from a beast horn or a beast tooth, suddenly broke off from the long whip. A few green rays chased after it, and stabbed it a few times. When they realized that it was useless, they immediately flashed back to join the group, and continued to attack the long, black thing. The fang-like tail of the whip fell to the ground sadly. However, it was just the beginning. With it leading the way, the broken whip followed in its footsteps. Yanqing felt like crying but had no tears. He stopped making hand seals, and the black dragon whip was dismembered just like that. The victorious green rays seemed to be a little unsatisfied. They flew around in the air for a while. When there was really no target to attack, they obediently returned to their sword positions. When the various sects witnessed this scene, they were speechless. Such a fierce sword technique was simply unheard of and unseen. Today was an eye-opener for them. When everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu again, their gazes were much more solemn. In the past, when they heard that Yu Qianqiu defeated Luo Qingtian, many people did not see it with their own eyes. They thought that it was because of the sharpness of the treasure and luck. Now everyone clearly saw the word strength. Although the outcome of this battle had not been decided, Yu Qianqiu had such a powerful and outstanding sword technique. There was no doubt that he should have a place in the cultivation world. The contemptuous gazes of the various sects had disappeared. From today onwards, they would look at this young man with a rather bad reputation. Ziyi's eyes were full of splendor. She watched with relish. It seemed that no matter when or who Yu Qianqiu fought, she would not be very worried. Because of her blind worship of Bai Changchun, she had already thought that Elder Bai's disciple should be like this. Yanqing looked around a little gloomily. Thousands of flying swords were floating in the valley, ready to attack from all angles, aiming at him inside the protective aura. The cyan sword net completely surrounded him. At this moment, whether it was the Cultivation Alliance or Yan Bugui and the others, when they saw this scene in the valley, they all felt a little ashamed for Yancheng. A tribulation-passing cultivator fighting with a nascent soul cultivator was actually trapped to the point that he could not move an inch. It was simply a joke. Yu Qianqiu glanced at Yan Bugui, who was on the top of the mountain, and smiled faintly at Yancheng. Although you were the one who provoked me, I have always been a kind person. You are the only one left out of the three of you. I can't bear to kill you. If you kneel down and beg for mercy, I can spare your life. As soon as he said this, several cold snorts came from Yan Bugui's side, echoing in the valley. It could be seen that the person who made the sound had a very high cultivation. That group of people stared at Yu Qianqiu like knives. Yancheng was representing them. If he knelt down and admitted defeat, he would not only lose face, but Yan Bugui and the others who took the initiative to challenge him would also be completely disgraced. This was just like if someone from the Cultivation Alliance knelt down and admitted defeat. Then the face that the Wuxia cultivation world would be lost even if they wanted to in the future. The people from the Cultivation Alliance also secretly clicked their tongues, thinking that Yu Qianqiu had really gone too far by saying such words. But they didn't know that Yu Qianqiu had other considerations. There were rules in the challenge. If one party admitted defeat, the other party could not kill again. He provoked them with words because he wanted to cut off the other party's way of admitting defeat, and then kill them. He never thought that letting his opponent live was a good thing. Since he had decided to use this battle to earn a name in the cultivation world, then the experience from his previous life told him that it was often more effective to win people over with virtue than to have a fierce reputation. As long as he stood firm, he could slowly accumulate virtue and do good in the future. Sure enough, when Yancheng heard this, he immediately flew into a rage. He pointed his finger and shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, don't be so arrogant. You want to force me to beg for mercy and admit defeat with just a flying sword? What a joke." Clang. As soon as he finished speaking, he saw a green light hit his protective vigor chi like lightning. The protective vigor chi was not damaged at all, and the green light quickly returned to its place. Yu Qianqiu nodded and said with a smile, "Sure enough, you have something to rely on, no wonder. But today, I will let you foreign cultivators learn a lesson. How can the Wuxia cultivation world be a place where you can mess around?" Chapter 397. Hearing this, Yan Bugui was silent, but some of the people around him were livid. The Cultivation Alliance naturally applauded. Yancheng snorted coldly. Relying on his protective gang qi, he forcefully knocked away the flying swords that stopped around him, and quickly rushed towards the direction of Yan Bugui and the others. His intention was obvious. As long as he left the valley, he would lose, and the opponent would not chase him anymore. This was the best way to save his life after failing the challenge. Yu Qianqiu sneered. "Sure enough, as I expected, everyone wants to live when they are in danger. You want to run away like this? Fortunately, I planned it first. Otherwise, if you admit defeat in public, I will have to stop." Everyone also saw Yancheng's intention. He did not admit defeat verbally, but he wanted to escape. He wanted to save his life, but he did not want to lose too much face. Next, it was up to Yu Qianqiu to make him stay. To everyone's surprise, the flying swords all over the valley did not carry out a fierce attack. Hundreds of flying swords moved with Yancheng, waiting for the right moment, and the remaining hundreds of swords wrapped around the protective gang qi that was escaping. Looking from a distance, it looked like a cactus or a hedgehog flying. Yu Qianqiu stopped in midair, arms crossed in front of his chest, and stared expressionlessly at the spiked ball. Everyone did not know what he was going to do. Yancheng, who was hiding in the protective gang qi, also felt a little surprised. The opponent did not attack forcefully. Although this was good, it made people feel inexplicably uneasy. His worry was right. Yu Qianqiu would not let him go like this. Just as he felt uneasy and sped up to escape, a scorching heat suddenly came from outside his protective upstanding qi. The protective upstanding qi that was connected to his mind almost collapsed in an instant, but the flying swords outside forced him to resist it with brute force. Everyone was surprised to find that Yin Cheng had stopped in the air. Could it be that he suddenly came to his senses and wanted to fight with Yu Qianqiu for the sake of his dignity? Yen Bugui and the rest looked at each other, not knowing what Yin Cheng was trying to do. Glancing at Yu Qianqiu, they realized that he was sneering at them with malicious intentions. Suddenly, they felt that something was amiss. Several voice transmissions rang out in Yen Cheng's ears, asking him what exactly was going on. However, he was currently in a difficult situation and was circulating his energy to resist with all his might. The scorching heat seemed to be teasing him. When he was just able to adapt a little, the temperature immediately rose a little. When he was barely able to adapt, the temperature rose again. It seemed that it would not let go until he was forced to use his protective upstanding qi. However, he had no treasures in his hands now. Once he left the protective upstanding qi and faced the 1,000 flying swords outside, he would die. Yen Cheng's eyes were red, his skin was bright red, and his 7 orifices were bleeding. Finally, he could no longer bear such torment. He made the same move as the Daoyuo sect master Luo Qingtian, self-destructing his protective aura shield. Bang! Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, a loud noise sounded out of thin air. The spiky ball wrapped by the green flying swords was instantly blown into pieces. The airflow surged and a figure quickly sprang out from it. He wanted to take advantage of the impact of the explosion to scatter the flying swords and quickly escape. However, there were only a few hundred flying swords that were blown away by the explosion. The remaining few hundred were already prepared and waiting for him. As soon as Yen Cheng sprang out, hundreds of green cold lights immediately broke through the turbulent airflow and shot towards him from all directions like lightning. Yen Cheng was able to cultivate to the middle stage of crossing calamity, so he was not completely useless. Without the burden of the protective aura shield, when he saw the group of flying swords attacking him, he also went all out. He immediately struck out his palms in all directions like shadows. Bang, bang, bang. He slapped out a powerful force, knocking away the flying swords that were attacking him. He forcefully resisted the first round of attacks with his profound cultivation base. However, there were too many flying swords. Even the green flying swords that were blown away by his self-detonation of the protective aura shield also swept towards him again. Everyone was silent. Looking at the situation, they knew that this master in the middle stage of crossing calamity was making a futile last-ditch struggle. He forcibly consumed his cultivation base to resist, but he could not move an inch. How long could he resist like this? Although they did not know what method Yu Qianqiu used to force him to self-detonate his protective aura shield, since he had arranged everything step by step, they were afraid that he did not intend to let him go. After all, there were too many flying swords. Finally, there was a streak of cyan cold light that slipped through the net. Yen Cheng, who was already bleeding from his 7 apertures, suddenly felt a chill on his back. His body fiercely trembled, and after a slight ferocious expression, an inexplicable sorrow flashed across his face. He saw with his own eyes that a cyan blade had drilled out of his chest, bringing with it a bright red flower of blood. Yen Cheng used all his strength to slap a few times and shouted at Yu Qianqiu in a shrill voice. Yu Qianqiu, even if I become a ghost, I will not let you go. His mournful voice reverberated endlessly in the valley. It was no wonder that he would say such resentful words. After he died, the deaths of his 3 fellow apprentices were inextricably linked to Yu Qianqiu. How could he not hate? All of a sudden, thousands of flying swords stopped in the air and did not continue to attack. Everyone was surprised. Was this guy going to show mercy? While they were puzzled, they heard Yu Qianqiu say indifferently, "Even if I become a ghost, you will not let me go." What a joke. I hope you can cultivate until the end of the Ghost King after you become a ghost. Otherwise you are not even qualified to see me. I have a word of advice for you. After you become a ghost, you should peacefully reincarnate as a human. This conversation puzzled everyone, but Ze and the people of the four families understood. If a person became a ghost, his resentment would be too strong. It was possible that he would not enter the underworld and stay in the human world. However, the yang-qi in the human world was too strong. It was not something that a little ghost who had just become a ghost cultivator could bear. He was afraid that his soul would disappear soon. Even if he could barely survive, how could the cultivators of the human world let a ghost cultivator stay in the human world? The Taoist protector would definitely kill him. At present, the only place suitable for ghost cultivators to cultivate was the demon ghost realm, which gathered yin qi. However, if they wanted to find trouble with Yu Qianqiu in the demon ghost realm, with Yu Qianqiu's identity in the demon ghost realm, it would be a joke if it was not. As soon as he finished speaking, the green light flashed, and the sword swarmed to snatch it. In exchange, a shrill scream was drowned in the bloodthirsty green light in the blink of an eye. As the blood mist spread in the air, a few pieces of ragged clothes were also chased by the green light and turned into dust. Everyone gasped. Not only was this sword technique powerful and fierce, but it was also abnormally vicious. It actually turned Yan Cheng's bones into dust. Not even a piece of his remains was left. The people of supporting Immortal's island looked at each other firmly again. The Guyuan sword technique could actually be so fierce. It was really a top-notch sword technique for killing enemies. As the smell of blood spread, Yu Qianqiu frowned slightly. He opened his arms and thousands of cold lights were summoned. They split into two green torrents and returned. In the blink of an eye, all of them were absorbed into his sleeves. Immediately, Yu Qianqiu's figure flashed, and he quickly returned to the front of the four families on his sword. As soon as he landed, the green light under his feet also nimbly flicked into his sleeves. The blood mist in the air was blown away by a gust of wind. Ziyi looked at Yu Qianqiu, who had returned victorious, and clapped her hands excitedly. The applause was abrupt. The atmosphere on the side of the Cultivation Alliance also recovered from the depressing atmosphere. When they remembered that they had won again, they immediately cheered again. However, everyone seemed to have lost the passion from before. The applause and cheers were much more reserved. Everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu with a more complicated expression. From today onwards, no sect would dare to look down on this person. Senior Chang, why didn't you let me shout for Yan Cheng just now? At least he could have saved his life. Yan Bugui asked the old man in embroidered robes beside him. Just now, Yan Cheng was in a precarious situation. When he was about to shout for help, he was stopped by the old man. The old man in embroidered robes replied with a faint smile. Palace Master Yan, you are now representing the cultivation world of each country. How can you say something like admitting defeat? This explanation is too far-fetched. If I can't say it, can't you say it too? Who knows what you are planning? Yan Bugui frowned and didn't say anything. The old man in embroidered robes seemed to have seen through his thoughts. He said with a smile, although Yan Ji of Xiushui country's rumor sect can't personally come to the cultivation world of China, he has a junior brother named Yan Huan. His cultivation level is quite high. He has reached the peak of the final stage of tribulation passing. It is said that he has reached the beginning of the soul formation stage. If Yanji knew that all three of his disciples died here, he would definitely ask his junior brother to come here. Palace Master Yan, do you think it's worth it to exchange the life of a cultivator in the middle stage of tribulation passing for an expert who is close to the soul formation stage? Yan Bugui pondered for a moment and said with a voice transmission. An expert who is close to the soul formation stage? Senior Chang, didn't you say that the world's most powerful cultivator forbade any soul formation stage cultivators to come to the cultivation world of China? If we really attract this expert, will it provoke the world's most powerful cultivator to intervene? No, although Yan Huan's cultivation level is high, he has not reached the soul formation stage. He is not restricted. The old man in embroidered robes' face twitched. Who is the world's most powerful cultivator? Have you seen him before, Senior Chang? Yan Bugui asked with a voice transmission. To be honest, a year ago, Yin Bugue had always thought that soul formation stage cultivators were legendary figures who probably didn't exist in reality. However, in his most critical moment, a group of disciples of soul formation stage cultivators suddenly came to his rescue. This was simply unbelievable. After the incident, both sides reached an agreement to use each other. He also understood the purpose of these people's visit. However, what he was most curious about was what kind of person the legendary world's most powerful cultivator was. How could he make so many soul formation stage cultivators hesitate and really not dare to take a step into China? This was a little unimaginable. He had asked these people more than once, but no one was willing to tell him in detail. It was as if this world's most powerful cultivator was a taboo in everyone's mouth. Hearing this, the old man in embroidered robes went into a trance. That time, he begged his master to take him to the East Sea to see the world. At the time, his master didn't think it was a big deal, so he brought him along. Who knew what happened in the end? It was simply chilling. That person brazenly forced all the soul formation stage cultivators in the world to swear a poison oath. In the end, because he was slightly unhappy, he attacked. After being humiliated, 16 top-level cultivators joined forces to fight to the death, but they all died in the hands of that person. That light green-robed figure was like a nightmare. Whenever he closed his eyes, he would remember that person's cultivation level was so terrifying that he couldn't even imagine it in his dreams. Palace Master Yen, that kind of person is not someone we should be concerned about. Let's take care of the matter in front of us. The old man in embroidered robes said with a changing expression. None of them told the Yen father and son that the reason why the soul formation stage cultivators didn't come was because they were forced to swear a poison oath. There were two reasons why they didn't say it. The first was because they were afraid that the Yen father and son would be scared. The second was because no one would say that their master had been humiliated. Yen Bugue grunted and slightly nodded his head. Out of the corner of his eyes, he caught a slight trace of fear on the old man's face. In his heart, he made up his mind to find a way to understand this world's most powerful cultivator. Otherwise, when the time comes, he wouldn't know he had suffered a loss. Chapter 398. After a long time, no one from either side accepted the challenge. Yen Bugue looked at the people on his left and right. Seeing their hesitant eyes, he couldn't help but sneer in his heart. Before this, they were all determined to raise 1 billion, ready to embarrass the Wuxia cultivation world and make a fortune. Now a nascent soul stage Yuqianqiu had scared them so much that no one dared to go up. Yen Bugue's guess was right. Except for the two experts at the final stage of tribulation passing, the other dozens of people were indeed quite afraid of Yuqianqiu. They wanted to go down and accept the challenge, but they were afraid that the guy with 1,000 flying swords would jump out again. Everyone's cultivation was about the same as Yen Cheng and his brothers, so they couldn't be much higher. They really couldn't guarantee that they could win against Yuqianqiu. No one was willing to risk their lives to try. They could only wait for someone else to come up and then challenge him. On the side of the Cultivation Alliance, seeing that the 3 whip experts had all been killed, and the threat of the strange whip was gone, they were a little tempted. However, they were also worried that these foreign cultivators would use some strange treasures again, so they were a little hesitant. Yuqianqiu looked around and sneered. They wanted to show off, but they were afraid of paying the price. Every one of them was calculating, and none of them were good. After cursing in his heart, he looked at Ze. Ze was excited and asked, "Do you want me to go up?" Just as Yuqianqiu was about to nod his head to signal her to make a move, they heard the sound of something flying through the air in the distance. Everyone raised their heads and looked over. A black shadow arrived in the blink of an eye, landing directly in front of the people from the Myriad Demon's palace. A lean and skinny old man in black slowly turned around with his hands behind his back. His snow-white hair flowed freely behind his back as he stared at the mountaintop where Yen Bugue was at with a glint in his eyes. Before he spoke, the aura of a superior made all the people of the 10,000 demons stand with their hands tied, and they lowered their heads slightly without saying a word. Hiss. Baishan took a deep breath and said, "Why is he here? Who is this person?" Yuqianqiu asked, puzzled. To be able to make the 10,000 demons look like this, the person who came must have a high status among the 10,000 demons. It's Yan Wuchen. He's the previous palace master of the 10,000 demons. Why is he here? Before Baishan could reply, many people around him answered Yu Qianqiu's question. This person was known as the most ambitious and ruthless person in the Devil Path, the previous palace master of the 10,000 demons, Yan Wuchen. Now that he had come, it was unknown why he had come, but it was most likely related to his son, Yan Bugui. When Yu Qianqiu heard this, he immediately sized him up carefully. Such a famous figure was the #1 gangster in the cultivation world. Worthy of reverence. Yan Wuchen had been famous in the cultivation world for a long time. He had retired many years ago, so most people had never seen him before. Now that he had suddenly appeared, he immediately became the center of attention. Humph! Unfilial son. Yan Wuchen let out a cold snort. His voice was not loud, but it echoed in the valley, showing his cultivation level. Yan Bugui looked over, and was already a little dumbfounded. The cultivators from the other countries also frowned. Yu Qianqiu looked at both sides, and his heart was filled with joy. There was going to be a good show to watch. Wuhan! Yan Wuchen called out coldly. Qiu Wuyuan immediately went over and bowed respectfully. Master! What's the situation now? Yan Wuchen asked. Qiu Wuyuan immediately recounted the entire process of the challenge, pointing at Yu Qianqiu as he spoke. Unexpectedly, as soon as he finished speaking, everyone saw Yan Wuchen backhand slap Qiu Wuyuan's face. After being slapped, Qiu Wuyuan lowered his head and didn't say anything. Instead, he became even more respectful. Yan Wuchen turned his head and stared coldly at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu hated people who took advantage of their seniority. He turned his head to the side, too lazy to pay attention to them. He didn't care who they were. That slap shocked everyone. Yan Wuchen really didn't give any face to Qiu Wuyuan. He slapped Qiu Wuyuan in front of so many people. Everyone was stunned when they suddenly realized that Yan Bugui had disappeared. They looked around and found that he was already in the valley. What was he going to do? Late-stage tribulation cultivator, Yan Wuchen is here to accept the challenge. The voice spread loudly in the valley, answering everyone's doubts. The various sects of the cultivation alliance looked at each other. They didn't expect that someone like Yan Wuchen, who was rarely seen, would come all the way here just to ruin his own son's reputation. Yan Bugui and the others were livid, especially Yan Bugui, who looked like he had lost his soul. All the cultivators from the various countries stared at the two old men beside Yan Bugui. One was dressed in brocade robes, the other in linen robes. Only their cultivation was qualified to fight against him. But the two of them looked at Yan Bugui with an unreadable expression. Yan Wuchen stood indifferently in the valley with his hands behind his back, quietly waiting for his opponent to challenge him. However, as time passed, no one from his opponent came out. Yu Qianqiu observed the movements of Yan Bugui and the others, and the corner of his mouth curled up. Interesting. If this continued, Yan Bugui's side would automatically admit defeat after 2 hours. It seemed that they could consider splitting the money. Just as the 2 hours were about to end, the old man in linen robes stepped out with a sullen face. Yan Bugui immediately stretched out his arm to stop him, and shook his head bitterly. Senior Feng, no. That's my father. Yan Wuchen glanced over slightly. The old man in linen robes said in a low voice, Palace Lord Yan, you must be joking. You have to understand that if we don't accept the challenge, we will lose 1 billion. This is not a small amount. We can't lose 1 billion just because it's your father. Who has the face to be worth 1 billion? Senior Chong, do you have any good ideas? Yan Bugui turned and asked the old man in brocade robes for advice. Who doesn't have parents? Palace Lord Yan, we all understand your difficulties. The old man in brocade robes paused and continued, but it's unreasonable to let everyone lose 1 billion just because of your father. This 1 billion is almost all the money we have in our pockets. To us, it's not a small amount. Even if I agree, no one else will. Unless Palace Lord Yan has another way to compensate us for our losses, there's nothing I can do. Yan Bugui's heart was filled with anger. The challenge was caused by you guys. Now, other than the two of you who are in the final stage of the tribulation passing stage, the rest of the tribulation passing stage have been intimidated by Yu Qianqiu. Even if the two of you fight, who can guarantee that you'll be a match for my father? Now you're asking me to compensate for your losses? If I can really unify the cultivation world of China, then I can let you pick any two spirit stone mines and mine them indefinitely. Right now, I can only make an empty promise. If you don't think it's appropriate, then please do as you please. Yan Bugui said in a low voice. He had no choice but to make this promise. If it was someone else, he wouldn't care. After all, he didn't have to pay a single spirit stone. However, it was his own father. No matter how bad he was, he didn't dare to be accused of disobeying his own father. The group of people exchanged glances, expressing their agreement by not speaking. One had to know that a top-grade spirit stone mine could earn tens of millions of upper-grade spirit stones in a year. It would only take 100 years to recoup the cost. To cultivators, 100 years was not too long. But two top-grade spirit stone mines would only take 50 years, not to mention that they could mine it indefinitely. It should be a huge profit. The only risk was that even if everyone worked together, they might not be able to help Yan Bugui unify the cultivation world of China. Then there would be nothing left. But it shouldn't be a big problem. The old man in linen clothes relaxed. The old man in brocade clothes looked at the crowd and smiled at Yan Bugui. Since Palace Lord Yan has put it this way, we naturally can't do anything to make you and your father turn against each other. So, we'll do as Palace Lord Yan says. We shouldn't stay here for long. Let's go. The group of people suddenly left in a hurry. The people of the Cultivation Alliance were all stunned. Then they all looked at Yan Wuchen, who was in the valley. Needless to say, it was because of his father that Yan Bugui could give up 1 billion spirit stones and retreat without a fight. 1 billion spirit stones. He threw it away just like that. What a deep bond between father and son. Yan Wuchen raised his head slightly and looked in the direction of Yan Bugui's departure. He did not move for a long time. The opponent withdrew, and the challenge ended just like that. It was an unexpected win, and no one felt that there was anything to be happy about. Next, what everyone was most concerned about was the ownership and division of the 1 billion spirit stones. That was a large sum of money. The ones who had the opportunity to divide it were naturally the top 10 sects of the Orthodox and Devil sects, and the 4 great clans. As for the other sects who did not contribute money or effort, and instead watched the show for nothing, they naturally did not have a share. The crowd returned to the 100 Flowers Valley. Yu Qianqiu and Zi followed closely behind the 10,000 demons. They had their money in their hands, and they were a little worried if they did not follow them closely. Running away with money could happen in any era. In the Cultivation Alliance, the first thing to do was to follow the agreement from the beginning. Everyone would get back how much they had contributed. Yu Qianqiu happily pocketed his 40 million. Then he stood guard at the edge of the myriad demons' palace, waiting for the distribution. He thought to himself, I've won 2 rounds, so I should get the biggest share. Zi also followed beside him with a face full of excitement, waiting to get the money. The 2 guys who only cared about money were smiling from ear to ear, and they looked quite lovable when they saw them. We agreed before that 1 billion spirit stones will be divided into 20 parts, and each part will be 50 million. Winning 1 round will get 50 million. Supporting Immortal Island won the first round, so they should get 50 million first. Yu Qianqiu won 2 rounds, so he should get 100 million. Senior Yan of the 10,000 demons came out to scare off the opponent, so he naturally won 1 round, so the 10,000 demons should also get 50 million. As for the remaining 800 million, I suggest that we split it according to the proportion of contribution. Zhu Xianxian of the Daoyuo sect suggested. Not bad, this is considered fair. I agree. The Blood Demon Palace, the Corpse sect, the Moon sect, and some other sects that paid expressed their agreement. Yu Qianqiu silently calculated in his heart, and the smile on his face froze, and his expression suddenly darkened. This doesn't seem right. Qiu Wuyuan looked around at the crowd and said, if it wasn't for my master this time, who knows how long this challenge would have lasted? and who knows what would have happened. It can be said that my master ended the last 17 rounds by himself, so the 10,000 demons should get 17 portions of the money. However, the 10,000 demons will not do something like eating all the money alone. I am willing to give 2 portions to the sects that paid, but did not contribute. Chapter 399. Heh, it's true that Senior Yen is an honorable man, but he's only made an appearance once, and he hasn't even done anything yet. Isn't this appearance fee a little too high? Zhu Xianxian looked at the crowd and asked with a smile. Zhu Xianxian, don't be so sarcastic. Qiu Wuyuan glared at him and said, everyone is well aware that if it wasn't for my master's arrival, Yen Bugui wouldn't have thrown down 1 billion for us to take advantage of. Your Deluo sect hasn't even done anything, yet you're already able to take advantage of it. Could it be that you think it's too little? At this time, Yen Wuchen had already gone to rest at the 10,000 Demons shop in the 100 Flowers Valley. With his status, he naturally wouldn't come here to fight for money with a bunch of people. However, as a disciple, Qiu Wuyuan naturally had to work hard. The more he got, the more he could demonstrate his master's value. In addition, this was also a fight for huge profits, so he couldn't just give up like that. Your 10,000 demons want to take 15 portions each? Aren't you afraid of bursting? Zhu Xianxian retorted. There was a lot of sarcasm in the surrounding. The sects that had contributed were obviously not interested in Qiu Wuyuan's proposal. If he took more, everyone else would naturally get less. Those who contribute the most should get more. This logic works everywhere. Qiu Wuyuan said unhappily. Those who contribute the most should get more. I agree with this. Baishan of the 4 great clans stood up and smiled at the crowd. No matter how you calculate, you all agree on 20 portions. Have you all forgotten that the 4 great clans also contributed a portion? Moreover, Yu Qianqiu has represented the 4 great clans in 2 consecutive victories. He has contributed a lot. Why don't you all listen to his opinion? He had seen Yu Qianqiu's sour expression earlier. It was obvious that he didn't agree with the distribution method. Or rather, it wasn't what he wanted. Thus, he came out to remind everyone. Baishan believed that this guy wasn't someone who would easily take a loss, especially when it came to money. Everyone was thinking about their own interests and almost forgot about this great hero. Qiu Wuyuan was taken aback. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and asked, Brother Yu, what do you think? Seeing Yu Qianqiu's dark face, he suddenly had a bad feeling. What the hell am I looking at? Yu Qianqiu threw a tantrum first, then he pointed at the crowd and sneered. When it comes to money, all of you are so desperate that you don't even want to fork out a single spirit stone. You even dragged the 4 major clans into this. When it was time to split the money, each of them was even more shameless, wishing that they could put all the money into their own pockets. Today, I've finally witnessed the demeanor of a great sect. Everyone's expressions changed. If it was before, there would definitely be a bunch of people scolding him or teaching him a lesson. But now, after seeing his strength, everyone had to restrain themselves. Baishan smiled and took a step back. It was up to Yu Qianqiu to decide whether he would win or lose. He just had to stand up for him at the crucial moment. Qiu Wuyuan frowned and said, Brother Yu, there's no need to talk about this nonsense. If you have any opinions, why don't you just say it and let everyone hear it? I'm an honest man, I don't have any opinions. I only know that when it came to money, it was agreed that whoever wins more matches will get more money. Those who don't win will not get a share. Yu Qianqiu's expression turned fierce. He pointed his fingers and said loudly, They fought 3 matches and won 3 matches. I don't care what's going on between Senior Yen and Yen Bugui. Anyway, he's able to scare everyone into not daring to accept his challenge. That's his ability. So I have no opinion even if Senior Yen wins that match. In other words, there are a total of 4 matches, and the billion will be split into 4 portions. The number of matches won will be split accordingly. There's no need to be so noisy. Of course, if I say this, people will definitely say that I'm greedy. Moreover, everyone has contributed. Fine. I'll take a step back and say that the sects that have contributed will also be counted as a share. The billion will be split into 5 portions. The winners will take 4 portions, and the remaining portion will be split among those who contributed. After the group of people from supporting Immortal Island heard this, they all nodded and didn't say anything. They had the title of the world's #1 sect, and it was really inconvenient for them to compete with others. Therefore they didn't say anything. According to Yu Qianqiu, if they could get 1/5 of the money, that would be 200 million. It was really not a small amount, and there was no reason for them to disagree. Qiu Wuyuan frowned and pondered. The other sects that contributed were obviously unhappy. According to Zhu Xianxian, they could get 800 million, but according to Yu Qianqiu, they could only get 200 million. The difference was too big. Yu Qianqiu, according to what you said, you want to take nearly half of the money. Aren't you looking down on the sects too much? One Zhongping from the Blood Demon Palace said to the crowd with a smile. It seemed like he wanted to use the sects to pressure Yu Qianqiu. You're old and muddled. Yu Qianqiu's words were shocking. He sneered and said, How did you say that I'm looking down on the sects? If I had known, I would have hidden in the back and waited to get a share of the money. Why did I have to go out and risk my life? In the future, if the Cultivation Alliance has such a good thing, I will definitely support it. Who doesn't like to get a share of the money without doing any work? I was depressed before. Why didn't the sects accept the challenge? I, a nascent soul cultivator, had to go out and fight with a tribulation cultivator. After such a long time, it turns out that there's such a shady business. I've learned a lot. It's worth learning. Someone dared to steal his money, and it wasn't a small amount. He didn't care if it was the Blood Demon Palace or the 10,000 demons. However, these words of mockery and ridicule really made the various sects somewhat embarrassed. Wen Zhongping was especially embarrassed. He couldn't help but fly into a rage and said, Yu Qianqiu, how dare you call yourself old man in front of me? Don't you know that there's a difference in etiquette between seniors and elders in this world? Disrespectful old man, trying to divide the wealth of juniors. Who has ever seen a senior like this? It's fine if a senior like this is disrespectful. The eyes of the world are like torches, and they can tell right from wrong. No one will say that I'm disrespectful. Yu Qianqiu said disdainfully. He thought to himself, Practice your tongue? I'll keep you company. How dare you? When Zhongping shouted angrily, the people from the Blood Demon Palace all stood up, looking like they were going to fight. The people from the 4 major clans immediately stood behind Yu Qianqiu, opposing the people from the 10,000 demons. Qiu Wuyuan and Quan Deming quickly stepped in between the two groups, trying to persuade them to talk things out. Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly and said, You want to fight? I've never been afraid of anyone. Back then, the sect leader of Ongquangsung, Lu Chongqing, was too much of a bully. I was only at the core formation stage back then, but I still dared to kill him. Now, if anyone else wants to try, why don't you think about it? When the time comes, don't blame me for being ruthless and unreasonable. Everyone smiled bitterly when they heard this. Not only did this guy kill the sect leader of Ongquangsung, Lu Chongqing, but he also crippled the sect leader of the Luo sect, Luo Qingtian. Calling him a lunatic was not an exaggeration. When Zhongping was furious. Yu Qianqiu, are you threatening the Blood Demon Palace? Yu Qianqiu glared at him coldly and snorted. I'm threatening you, not the Blood Demon Palace. But if you want to drag the Blood Demon Palace into this, I won't object. In short, there's nothing more than reason. We've agreed before that the more we win, the more we get. I've won 2 rounds, so I should take 400 million. That's the bare minimum. If anyone dares to give me less than a spirit stone, try it. I don't care if it's the Blood Demon Palace or the Clearwater Palace. No matter how famous you are, you still have to be reasonable. Otherwise, it's no different from robbery. With such a large sum of money, he definitely wouldn't back down. Everyone looked at each other. This guy openly admitted to threatening Wen Zhongping. It seemed like he wouldn't stop until he got his hands on 400 million. Wen Zhongping would probably lose face in front of so many people, and he wouldn't let this go. Wen Zhongping wanted to use the name of the Blood Demon Palace to pressure Yu Qianqiu, who knew that this guy didn't have any scruples at all. His words went straight to the face, not giving him any leeway to back down. Just as he was flushed with anger, Zhu Xianxian shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, this isn't a place for you to behave atrociously." He and Yu Qianqiu had an old grudge, and he had lost face because of it. Now there was a conflict of interest, so he couldn't help but jump out. "How am I behaving atrociously?" Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow and asked, "Zhu Xianxian, even though what I said wasn't pleasant to hear, every word I said was the truth. Which part of it was nonsense? Are you going to use the name of the Daoyuo sect to pressure me? Have you ever seen me afraid of the Daoyuo sect?" As soon as he said this, everyone immediately remembered how Yu Qianqiu killed Luo Xiaohan outside the 100 Flowers Valley, and how Zhu Xianxian avoided the battle. Recently, Yu Qianqiu had another fierce battle with the Daoyuo sect leader, and they really didn't see him afraid of the Daoyuo sect. These incidents had also caused the Daoyuo sect to lose face. Zhu Xianxian naturally let his imagination run wild when he heard this. He took a few steps forward but was stopped by Quan Deming. He couldn't help but fly into a rage out of humiliation and said, "Yu Qianqiu, don't try to be eloquent. Do you dare to fight me to the death?" Everyone was shocked. Wen Zhongping was originally angry, but he was stunned by these words. He looked at Zhu Xianxian speechlessly and thought, even Luo Qingtian isn't his opponent, and you actually want to challenge him? Aren't you overestimating yourself? Let's just talk. Why do you have to find trouble for yourself? He was sober now. Yu Qianqiu was also stunned. He took out a black machete from his storage bag and stabbed it into the ground. He sneered and said, "A gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists. If someone forces me to fight, they should first ask if my 6-foot black blade agrees to it." A murderous chill instantly burst forth from the blade. Everyone quivered. The black fellow's one blade is enough, power was still lingering in the air. Zhu Xianxian's pupils shrank when he saw the blade, and his anger had mostly cooled down. Qiu Wuyuan shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Everyone, calm down and discuss this properly. Brother Yu, please put away the blade," he said and gave Quan Deming a look. Quan Deming understood and comforted Zhu Xianxian. He pulled him back to his original position, giving Zhu Xianxian a way out. Wen Zhongping was also pulled back by Qiu Wuyuan. Yu Qianqiu also turned around to persuade the people from the 4 major families to leave. He turned around and raised his hand to point at the blade. With a solemn expression, he said in a sonorous voice, "Not for money or reputation, but for reason. The blade is fair, and I will not keep it for now. I will set this as evidence. If there is any injustice, Yu Qianqiu is willing to uphold justice with this blade. Even if the blade is destroyed and I die, I will not hesitate." His words were very righteous and emotional, as if he himself was the embodiment of justice. Everyone present cursed in their hearts. If we want money but don't care about face, then you want money but don't want to lose face. Why are you pretending to be righteous? If it's money, then it's money. Why talk so much about reason? He's clearly telling everyone that if anyone dares to give him less than a piece of spirit stone, he will fight with them. Isn't this bullying? Chapter 400. The people from the 4 major families looked at each other and thought to themselves, "No wonder the great ancestor chose him to be her personal disciple. He's really a talent." Bai Shan looked at Bai Zizong meaningfully, but the latter shook his head and smiled bitterly. Many people from the supporting Immortal Island sighed in their hearts. Such a talent was actually expelled from the supporting Immortal Island. If he was still around, he could take over Dongfang Chang'ao's position and represent the supporting Immortal Island in the cultivation world. He would definitely be able to fight for the greatest benefits for the supporting Immortal Island. The supporting Immortal Island lacked shameless people like him. Qiu Wuyuan's face twitched. He still couldn't understand why Yu Qianqiu said he wanted to join the 10,000 demons. He didn't know if it was true or not. Yu Qianqiu's face was solemn. He crossed his arms and stood beside the saber. He seemed to be determined to maintain fairness and justice. In fact, everyone knew what was going on. It wasn't as righteous as he made it out to be. In the end, it was all about money. However, no one blamed him now. This was the truth. There were some things that people wouldn't say even if they knew the truth. Once it was said, everyone would be embarrassed. If they were to fight, the consequences would be unpredictable. After all, those who could sit here were not 3-year-olds. There was a price to pay for being impulsive. But then again, if Yu Qianqiu didn't possess some strength and dared to cause trouble here, then he would have probably been slapped to death a long time ago. Similarly, if that was the case, he wouldn't have come here to court death. One should do things according to one's strength. Overestimating one's strength would only make one suffer. Retribution would always be on oneself. In the midst of the silence, Yan Wuchen, Niu San Jinyan, Fan Benlei, and Dong Fengchang, Ao walked in together. An aura that belonged to experts instantly covered the entire place. These 5 people were prominent figures from both the orthodox and demon sections. Everyone present stood slightly to pay their respects. The pupils of the 5 people shrank slightly. They saw the saber standing in the middle of the place, and Yu Qianqiu guarding the side of the saber. What's going on? Yan Wuchen, who was seated at the front, asked in a deep voice as he swept his gaze across the crowd. Qiu Wuyuan immediately went over and explained the whole story respectfully. At the same time, Quan Deming also took the initiative to explain to Jin Yan and Fan Benlei. After understanding what was going on, Yan Wuchen glanced sideways at the few people around him. Then he stared at the unmoving Yu Qianqiu and walked over slowly. Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow and turned around, just in time to meet Yan Wuchen's bright eyes. He also slowly turned around. Yan Wuchen had always exuded the aura of a superior, and at this moment, it was overpowering Yu Qianqiu, as though he wanted him to submit. However, Yu Qianqiu's eyes narrowed slightly. The experience of dominating an area in his previous life appeared in his mind. The pride that he had suppressed for a long time suddenly burst forth from his body. 2 invisible auras of a superior were undoubtedly revealed. One aura that looked down on the world, the other aura that dominated an area. Suddenly they clashed and clashed. Ordinary mortals might not be able to see anything, but the cultivators present were especially sensitive to auras. They immediately picked up on some clues and looked at Yu Qianqiu in shock. They could clearly sense the decisive and murderous aura of a superior from Yu Qianqiu. It was impossible for someone who had not been an overlord for a long time to have such an aura. This was not something that could be faked easily. It might be able to deceive ordinary mortals, but in the eyes of a cultivator, it would be immediately exposed. At this moment, the scoundrel aura on Yu Qianqiu was nowhere to be seen. His entire person instantly changed. He looked at Yan Wuchen coldly and indifferently, without a trace of fear. In terms of aura, he could completely compete with Yan Wuchen. The people from the 4 great families did not expect Yu Qianqiu to have such a side to him. Purple Dress was slightly surprised, but she quickly calmed down. How could an ordinary person compare to Elder Bai's disciple? Yan Wuchen frowned slightly. His gaze paused on the black broadsword. He turned to look at the crowd and said, "The 10,000 demons agree with Yu Qianqiu's distribution method." After saying that, he continued walking forward. When he brushed past Yu Qianqiu, he stopped and tilted his head to say, "I heard that little brother is a talent of the younger generation. Seeing you today, you really do live up to your reputation." "Senior Yan, you flatter me." Yu Qianqiu replied indifferently. "I heard that little brother has already accepted Palace Lord Bu's invitation. When the time comes, I will find a chance to have a chat with little brother." "Senior, I admire your elegance. It is more than I could ask for. If there is a chance, I will definitely pay you a visit." Yu Qianqiu bowed slightly and said, "A negotiation between real superiors did not require too much nonsense." The exchange of conditions was reached with a look and a sentence. The meaning was simple. "During the competition, Qiu Wuyuan drove you away. I am now sacrificing a lot of benefits to compensate you. Let's forget about what happened in the past. Courtesy demands reciprocity." The other party had made a lot of concessions, and he did not lose anything. Naturally, Yu Qianqiu agreed. Yan Wuchen nodded and walked into the Cultivation Alliance. Jin Yan, Fan Benlei, and the others also walked past Yu Qianqiu. Dong Fengchang, Ao paused for a moment before he turned around and said to everyone, "Supporting Immortal's Island agrees with Yu Qianqiu's distribution method." He took a deep look at Yu Qianqiu. The higher-ups of supporting Immortal's Island had long been informed by the sect master not to provoke Yu Qianqiu. Although Feng Xiangtian did not explain clearly, there must be something unusual behind it. After a few people who seemed to be more powerful went in, Qiu Wuyuan and Quan Deming looked at each other, and the latter said in a clear voice, "Does anyone have a different opinion?" All the sects were a little surprised. Why did even Yan Wuchen give in? This is a little strange. At this moment, Yuan Jiukui of the Hexapath Demon sect suddenly said loudly, "The Hexapath Demon sect has no opinion." All the sects were stunned again. Yuan Jiukui was at odds with Yu Qianqiu just a moment ago. Why did his attitude change so quickly? Yu Qianqiu was also a little puzzled. On the other side, Hua Yinyue of the Moon Clan also said, "The Moon Clan has no opinion either." Everyone looked at each other. Qiu Wuyuan looked around and said in a deep voice, "If no one objects, then this matter is decided." He naturally supported his master's decision. After a while still no one said anything. Qiu Wuyuan didn't say anything more. He took out a storage pouch and handed it to Quan Deming of supporting Immortal Island. Then he took out 2 storage pouches and handed them to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu took it and quickly counted it with his divine sense. After confirming that there were 400 million, he directly stuffed it into the storage bag. Then, he picked up the broadsword on the ground and put it away with satisfaction. It seemed that he was not going to maintain fairness and justice anymore. The remaining 200 million was divided according to the proportion of the capital contribution. Yu Qianqiu stuffed a few million into his storage bag. Patting his storage bag, he slowly walked to Quan Deming's side and glanced at his storage bag. It was as if he was saying, "Now that you have money, it's time for you to pay me what you owe me." Quan Deming shook his head and bitterly smiled. He took out a bag of holding and gave it to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu looked at it. 50 million was not a small amount, so he put it away. He didn't say much and casually walked out of the Cultivation Alliance. Everyone looked at him with indescribable feelings. They did not expect that supporting Immortal's Island and the 10,000 demons would not get the biggest profit. Instead, they were taken advantage of by him. They made a lot of money. Zi followed him out excitedly. The two of them did not say goodbye to the 4 families and left. 100 Flower House. Yu Qianqiu returned to his room and was about to do some private things. Who knew that Zi would follow him? He asked, "Don't you know that it is dangerous for a man and a woman to be alone in a room?" Zi subconsciously looked around. She did not seem to know where the danger was. She asked weakly, "Yu Qianqiu, how much did we earn this time?" "Nearly 460 million. Why do you ask?" Yu Qianqiu asked suspiciously. "Do you want to buy something again?" "No, I was just asking," Zi said excitedly. She looked like a money grubber. Yu Qianqiu could not bear to see a beauty like this. He took her hand and sent her out of the room. He closed the door and said, "Go back to your room. Don't run around. Don't disturb my rest." Oh. Ziyi's footsteps could be heard as she walked back to her room. Yu Qianqiu locked the door and windows and looked around the room. After confirming that there was no one around, he disappeared from the room. In Utopia's military camp, Guan Yu looked at the 3 storage bags on the table and clicked his tongue. 500 million. In just a few months he had obtained 500 million. Were spirit stones in the cultivation world so easy to obtain? How is the consumption of the limit-breaking pill? Yu Qianqiu asked as he lay on the chair and placed his legs on the table. Guan Yu's expression turned solemn as he said, "This limit-breaking pill is truly miraculous. Out of the 800 nascent soul cultivators, we've already created more than 300 early-stage tribulation-passing experts. With this 500 million, it's enough to create the remaining 500 nascent soul cultivators into early-stage tribulation-passing experts in a short period of time. There are already 300? Good. Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. Then he frowned and said, "Just because their cultivation has reached a certain level doesn't mean that they have the strength of an early-stage tribulation-passing expert." Use the 500 million to raise the cultivation of the remaining 500 people as soon as possible. Then gather these 800 people together for combat training. Spirit stones are hard to obtain. I need to rely on these 800 people to lay eggs. The spirit stones of the 10,000 people behind us will depend on these 800 people. Guan Yu nodded. When he thought about the scene of 800 well-trained tribulation-passing experts being dragged out together, he could not help but gasp. He had organized combat training for a long time, so he could imagine how terrifying it would be if these people gathered together to fight. If Yu Qianqiu wanted to do something heartless, the consequences would be unimaginable. You have to keep a close eye on my 2 disciples and Gu Qingyan. When their cultivation reaches the tribulation-passing stage, throw them into the combat training field and harshly hone them. It would be best to treat them as hypothetical enemies in the army and torture them to death. Of course, don't really kill them. It doesn't matter if they are beaten half to death. At most, they can come back after they have recovered. Yu Qianqiu said lightly. They are your disciples. You really have the heart to do that. Guan Yu said hesitantly. Yu Qianqiu shook his head and said, It's not that I don't have the heart to do that. It's precisely because they are my disciples that I have to be strict with them. It's better to sweat and bleed than to lose their lives when the time comes. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.